Testing. All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our SVCE board meeting for June. We will call the meeting to order at 7:01 p.m. A little bit. My eyes are a little blurry. We were up till 3:30 a.m. this morning with our council meeting, so not trying to get sympathy, but I am. So hopefully we will run through this meeting smoothly. Roll call, please.
Yes,
Andrea.
good evening. Chair Abikoga.
Here.
Vice Chair Miller.
Here.
Director Elahi. Director Sayok. Director Smith. Director Corrigan.
Here.
Director Gibbons.
Here.
Alternate Director Flagger.
Here.
Director Ellenberg.
Here.
Director Tovar.
Here.
Thank you. I'll note Director Martinez Beltran, Director Sinks, and Director Nunez are absent.
Thank you. We will now move on to public comments on matters not listed on the agenda. The public may provide comments on any item not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. Do we have any cards? Doesn't look like it. So we will move on then to our consent calendar. These items will be taken with one motion unless, is there any board member wishing to pull any of the items? No? Great. Any members of the public wishing to pull an item? No? If not, is there a
I
motion
move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
So motion by member Corrigan, second by member Smith. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. We go to the regular calendar, and we will start with our CEO report.
Thank you, Chair Abikoga, members of the board. I would like, gives me great pleasure to introduce several new members of our team. So I'm going to start off with Ian Williams. He's our Power Resources Manager, and today is his first day at work. Prior to joining SVCE, he worked as a Senior Power Supply Contract Manager at MCE, and before that, he worked for PG&E for 9 years, and he is quite an expert on the Renewable Portfolio Standard, portfolio optimization, Pacific Northwest hydroelectric resources, and also with ISO market design. So Ian holds a BA in economics from Harvard University, and I would like to invite Ian up to say a few words.
Hello. Chris, thanks for the introduction. Yes, so I'm excited to join the SVCE team. It's nice to work with a group of veteran kind of power resource people. This is a very difficult business, so it's nice to work with a team that's kind of, I like to call them grizzled veterans. So it's nice to, grizzled is a good term. As I said, I've worked at PG&E for almost 10 years in a variety of procurement and policy roles, and part of that I was at MCE. So I'm very aware of the CCA business model, the challenges with CCAs, and the challenges in general in terms of trying to be a carbon-free entity, especially on an hourly basis. So,
But how's your tennis game?
I was going to say, I'm probably one of the taller tennis players. 6'9", if anyone's curious. And I don't get to play as much as I used to. I have a bad knee. But yeah, back in the day, I used to be a pretty good tennis player.
So Ian did play on the Pro Tour.
It did.
Oh.
I have one ATP Tour doubles title. So
Oh, wow.
you can't take that away from me.
It's a fun fact. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ian. I would like now to, another note, which I'm sad about, but also very happy. I want to recognize Robert Sprague, who is an amazing employee. He worked for us for too short a time. He started with us in September 2018.
We can't let him just sit there, Rush. Get him to come up.
Come on up, Robert. And while I speak, you can figure out, what sad things you're going to be saying and why you regret leaving us.
You are the
But
best.
he has developed models to carry out multiple strategic analyses, including GHD scenario forecasting analysis, underpinning the community-wide GHG emissions roadmap. If you remember in our roadmap, we have that 2-page graphic which shows how the emissions come down. Well, there's a lot of modeling behind that. He basically developed that. Then time-dependent emissions assessment of different supply portfolio options to inform future integrated resource plan policy discussions. That takes away from what Ian talked about hourly emissions control. He was doing modeling for us to help us figure out strategies there. Additionally, high-resolution building baseline assessment and decarbonization roadmap using smart meter data, tax assessor data, vehicle registration, and the draft of the study has been carried out for Mountain View, and it'll be scaled for the rest of the service territory. Also, every once in a while, I will ask Amy for, can you just do a back-of-the-envelope analysis on blah, 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 blah? And literally, half a day later, it's Robert's spreadsheets that come in. It's just amazing. So we thank you very much for spending some time with us. We're really going to miss you, but we're going to hear a lot more about Robert in the years to come. Robert, you may want to address the board.
Good evening, everyone. It's been such a pleasure working for SVCE these past almost 8 months now. And you guys are doing great things, and it's been great being a part of it, and I look forward to seeing everything that goes on in the coming years. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'd like to introduce our newest intern, Ben Linthicum. He joined SVCE last month, May 13th, as an innovation analyst intern for the summer. Come on up, Ben. Supporting the programs team in the development and management of our innovation program. So he's working for Amy. Ben has a bachelor's degree in environmental studies from Warren Wilson College and is currently halfway through a master's degree at Yale in the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies.
Thank you for that awesome introduction.
I know.
Happy to be here. Thank you, everyone, for coming out on such a hot day. I see what you did there, going by height, calling us up. So I'm just curious who might be next. Anyways, so I'm working with Amy, as Reese mentioned, on drafting an innovation program roadmap to guide strategic investments in the innovation programs. Also working at developing a Q3 potential challenge event, and I'm incredibly excited to be here in a state, in a town, in a CCA that is leading the nation on energy policy and great climate programs. The rest of the United States could really learn from what y'all are doing here. And I came from Missouri and North Carolina, so I know a little bit about what the rest of the country is doing, and I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lastly, so that's our employee update. Thank you very much. Additionally, I would like to introduce the winners of the Stanford Cleantech Challenge, in which SVCE was a sponsor. We challenge students to develop solutions for improving information and awareness of all-electric building design and addressing barriers to electrifying single-family homes. So as Eric and Mike come on up to basically give you the same presentation that they made, that was the winning presentation, the home team, as they called themselves, was selected to win the overall grand prize by an independent panel of judges in the competition. So they're going to provide a brief presentation of their winning idea.
What school is that again?
Stanford University. Okay. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you here today. We were very happy to participate in this first Clean Tech Hackathon, and we really enjoyed the challenge that SVCE had. So we'll try to present very quickly what we presented there. Basically, so my name is Eric Trusowitz. This is Michael Levin. We had two other team members, Valerie Shen and Robbie Harding, who unfortunately aren't able to be here today. And we were a cross-disciplinary team, so from the law school, the business school, engineering school, and School of Earth. And we tried to personify the challenge of home electrification through a modern heat pump water heater that you can see here at the bottom of the slide, and we called him Wally. So that's our heat pump water heater, but Wally is really a stand-in for any kind of electrification of the home, any kind of a appliance that can help move from natural gas to a clean renewable energy from the grid. So that's the background. So here we basically started the story with Wally having the idea that he really wants to help the world, and he sees CO2 as an issue. He sees electrification of the home is a problem that he can help solve. So he's thinking about why or how he can do that. But he sees that there's really 4 barriers that he needs to solve in order to get into the home. One is to identify consumers that want him there. The other one is to inform them about his existence and why he's better than using natural gas. Another is to invest, actually for the consumer to invest and get financing in that, and then to actually be installed in the home. So these are actually very substantial obstacles, and we looked for simplicity in our solution, and the simple solution that we saw instead of reinventing the wheel was for him to partner with a solar provider. And here we just took the example of Sunrun, and this is because Sunrun or solar providers have solved these issues, already have the contact and have gotten over these 4 hurdles, and we see him piggybacking with solar providers into the home as a good solution. So once he gets into the home, he's happy in this slide, but very quickly he identifies that there's other modern electronic devices in the home, but he's pretty isolated from them. So we had the idea that he should be IoT integrated. He should be able to talk to all the other devices in the home, and especially he should be able to talk to the homeowner through a mobile application. And this would allow the homeowner then to start to optimize his consumption at this single individual home level. And since he's connected to the internet through IoT, once there's more of these type of devices installed, we would see a grid level communication, and we would see grid level benefits. So this could be a demand response mechanism. If there's thousands of Walty hot water heaters that can be turned on or off at grid peaks, then we see this as a real added value for the grid also. So.
Mm-hmm. And we saw this as initially applying to residential homes, but we think that over time we can scale up to like apartment buildings and commercial applications as well. This is a bigger version of Wally. We called her his big sister Wallette. We called her that because of all the money that they might be able to save for your wallet. So just to summarize the 3 solutions we offered, it was first to partner with solar providers for a go-to-market advantage to knock down a lot of those barriers that Wally faces getting into the home. The second was to make sure that he's integrated with IoT capabilities to provide time of use optimization and consumption data to consumers. And then finally, to leverage the customer network once you scale to provide a lot of valuable grid services. We think the financial impacts of this are significant. We did some analysis and based on some previous studies and projected that there could be 30 to 40% savings due to reduced customer acquisition costs by partnering with solar providers. The optimization based on the Internet of Things integration could reduce energy consumption by 10 to 15% per year. And then the grid services alone could be worth $200 or more per year per customer. And so we saw Wally kind of riding the waves of these trends of friendlier regulations looking to promote electrification, waves of environmentalism among the community, and a stronger trend of grid decarbonization more generally. We saw multiple paths home for Wally to get into the home. First, we thought SVCE might be able to do this in-house. We also thought SVCE or another company could propose a joint venture with someone like Sunrun or a solar provider. Or we think that this could be tackled independently by a startup. And this was us. This was the team. Yeah.
Thank you very much for engaging in it. This is one more innovative kind of outreach that we've been happy to engage with. So,
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
I think you have some.
I'm
questions
dying to
or
ask,
comments.
so I know the town of Los Altos Hills Environmental, our committee would love to see this report. I don't know, I'm assuming you're all very busy, but is your report available? Is this slideshow available? Could one of you, perhaps, could I coordinate a schedule and see if you were available to come present to that committee?
Sure.
I know they'd love to see it.
Yeah, the SVC already has the slide deck.
Contact.
You're welcome to share it with whoever you like. And yeah, if there's things get busy sometimes, but of course we're open to present to anyone who may be interested.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Margaret.
Yes.
No. I'm just curious. Thank you so much for that presentation.
Sure.
I'm curious when you guys are going to start the Wally startup. You have the best team here ready to go.
I think that's right. I think, well, we're both graduating. Actually, our entire team is graduating this year. And I think we're all moving different places. And so it'd be challenging to kind of coordinate among ourselves. But we are excited about the idea, and we'd like to see it pursued if possible.
Yeah. Sure.
Sorry. I'd just like to tell you, I think it's incredibly clever. I think it could be used as well for students. Again, it's just so gripping with the visualization. It makes it very easy. And they could probably advocate that for, pressure at home as well with parents. So
Wonderful.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to speak to this at the end of the meeting, but the American Institute of Architects just did a resolution for decarbonization of all buildings. And there's much of what you're presenting here that would be fun to share, so we'll find a way to do that.
Okay, you're welcome to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The last part of my report is to invite Hillary Staver, our Manager of Regulatory and Legislative Affairs, to give you an update on both those topics.
Good evening, directors. So as usual, we'll go through both regulatory and legislative tonight, touch on a couple things we haven't spoken about in a couple of months just because this is the last time we'll be here until August. So I'll start on the regulatory side, and we have the big item on that this month. I'm actually going to touch on only briefly because my colleague Don Bray is going to go into much greater detail in one of the items later on our agenda tonight. But that is a further resolution of how we're going to implement the expansion of direct access that the California legislature approved in SB 237 last year. So we've talked about this at a couple board meetings now as the Public Utilities Commission has moved through the proceeding that's working out the implementation details of that. And that decision was finally passed last month on May 30th, but we got some last minute red lines to the decision that do significantly impact the rollout. And the biggest one is the timeline. So originally, what the Public Utilities Commission had proposed is that the 4,000 gigawatt hours of new direct access that was going to be opened up in the state would be broken into two equal halves that would launch on January 1st, 2020 and January 1st, 2021. So we would be looking at two different tranches of load departure. And the Commission got significant stakeholder pushback on that because, well, for a variety of reasons, but one of them being that resource adequacy, the program that we use to help ensure reliability around the state, the compliance process for that is already well advanced. So as you know, we've been working on that for a few months now. The final showing that we have to make at the Public Utilities Commission is in October. And there were many stakeholders speaking to the fact that January 2020 was basically too early to roll out this direct access without making the resource adequacy market significantly more complicated. So the change to the decision that came kind of right before it was approved is they're now going to do this all at once. There will be no load departure in 2020, and the full 4,000 gigawatt hours will depart on January 1st, 2021. So we have traded off two smaller sort of changes in the market over starting much sooner for a larger one that starts further out. So that does not change our overall strategy around how we're going to work in this changing market, and you'll be hearing more about that later tonight. But I just wanted to flag on the regulatory side, that has now wrapped up the first phase in that proceeding. We're now moving into phase 2, which is a study. And that is a study that's due in summer 2020 to the legislature, looking at the potential impacts and opportunities of full direct access reopening in the non-residential market. So that's something that the state has not seen for a very long time. And the Public Utilities Commission will be conducting a stakeholder process to develop that report. So now that we've got some clarity on this initial 4,000 gigawatt hours, our focus is going to move to being involved in the development of that report to the extent that we can, and seeing where that goes. So I'll stop on that because you'll hear more later. And then just kind of some things that have been running in the background as a reminder since we're going through the summer. We are still actively working in the resource adequacy proceeding on developing a central buyer for local resource adequacy. This is something that we got an original decision earlier this spring that created a new 3-year requirement for the first time. But the idea of who the central buyer should be and what exactly should be their jurisdiction is ongoing. So I'll probably have some news on that in August. And also, we're continuing to work on updates to the PCIA and integrated resource planning. We're going to submit our next IRP in May 2020. So that process at the Public Utilities Commission is already starting, doing things like developing the modeling baselines for how we're going to look at the state in the next cycle here. So that's regulatory, and I'll stop there. Does anybody have questions? All right. Then legislative. So first of all, thank you all very much for all of your outreach on AB 56 in the last couple weeks. That made a huge difference. And as you've heard from my emails since then, the bill did pass the Assembly, but our entire delegation either abstained or opposed, which means a great deal. They have heard us. They were referencing our outreach on the floor. So that, from our perspective, although ultimately we wish the bill hadn't gone forward, is good news in terms of how our delegation views SVCE. So I'm very appreciative of your outreach on that, and that has continued. Most recently, thank you, Director Givens, for setting up a meeting with Senator Bell's office just this week. So we're now moving into the second half of the session. We've been kind of over the last few weeks taking stock of what has moved out of the House of Origin, and we're now back into policy committees. So we're getting more into technical details again. The second half, as you probably know, is where a lot of the sort of grand bargains are made. So we're continuing to watch specific bills that we already know are important, like AB 56 and SB 350, which is another bill where central statewide procurement could be queued up. But we're also expecting now that we could see CCA-relevant issues starting to crop up in other big bills that are developed, like bills related to wildfire response and preparedness. So overall, we've just passed the halfway point, and we're now focusing on the final, we're moving towards the end game in August and September. And I will be convening a legislative ad hoc committee group meeting in the coming weeks to do some planning for the second half of the session. So, any questions on that? All right. Thank you very much.
That's the end of my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Girish? No? If not, thank you very much for your report. We'll move on to item 3, to adopt a resolution to implement SVCE generation rate changes effective August 1st. And we have Mr. Bray. Welcome.
All right, thank you, Chair, and good evening, directors. Our goal here tonight is to review and approve specifics for a second set of rate changes that we're looking to make effective August 1st of this year. You'll remember just a few short months ago, back in April, the board approved 2 rate changes for this year. The first occurred in May, and it was on average about a 3% rate increase that we implemented across the board, and this reflected increases that had happened earlier in the year from PG&E, and also helped us maintain a steady 6% discount relative to PG&E as we did for much of last year. And then the board also approved a second increase with a little more fine print around it for August 1st. And what was approved was a move to a 1% discount, so 6% to 1%. And the result, or what that was a result of, was an anticipated very significant lowering in PG&E's rates that we thought we would see as of July 1st. And as you all remember, when we went through this, there was a suggestion made that we implement something called guardrails. Thank you, Director Smith. I think that was where the term originally came from. But seeing as it's hard to perfectly predict where PG&E is going with rates, we wanted to present a structure that wouldn't just be set strictly at 1%, but that it might have optionality in it to move to a different discount rate if, in fact, our underlying assumptions about PG&E rate changes were to change as of July 1st. So we've done that, and not surprisingly, our most recent information shows us that indeed the projections that PG&E had been stating in their reports, they changed a lot as of May, changed generally favorably for us, but very significantly. So tonight we're going to go through a new and improved version of guardrails. And then we're going to have guardrails on our guardrails, and I'll explain that too as we go. So just to take you through the specifics, when we talked about this last and had our assumptions in place, we were envisioning a 1.5% increase in the PCIA and a 6.5% decrease in PG&E's generation rates. The combined effect of those two factors was about a negative 7% impact on our rates, meaning we would have to reduce our rates by 7% to maintain a consistent level of discount. We didn't want to reduce rates by 7%, so the plan was to cut our discount and reduce rates, and the net effect of that was a 1% discount and about a 2% reduction in rates. That's what we were anticipating. What we now believe to be happening as of July 1st, based on some very recent filings by PG&E, is that we'll see a larger increase in PCIA of about 10.5%, and a generation rate increase of 4% versus what the previously anticipated 6.5% decrease. So a really big swing on the generation rate of over 10%. So the net impact is now no longer negative. It's slightly positive, meaning if we kept rates right where they are, our discount would go up by 0.5%, or we could increase rates by 0.5% and stay at that 6% discount. So we're in a little different territory now. We are expecting to get PG&E's final rates as of the 28th of June, so the suspense will be over once and for all. And we do anticipate that they're going to come in pretty close to the numbers that we're showing here. If you're visually oriented, this is a nice chart that Don Eckert put together. I want to be fair with the attribution here. This shows the long and winding road and how we got to where we are at this point.
It does not show any guardrails.
Don's a risk taker. Yeah. Okay, so if we were to adopt or to follow the board's recommendations as of April and implement a 1% discount as of August 1st, this chart shows what the impact would be to customer rates and to our contribution to reserves. So if you look at the top row, the 1% row, we would increase rates by 8% in August. That would be a cumulative increase if we add the 3% that we had in May of 11%, and we'd be adding another 16.8 million to reserves between August and January of next year. So that's what the 1% previously approved scenario looks like. And you can see how that plays down the page with different discount levels. Working with the executive committee, we basically circled the 3% row. We think that this is probably the smartest place for us to wind up. This results in a rate increase of 5% as of August, 8% for the year, so a non-trivial rate increase. It does improve our contribution to reserves by about $12.4 million. But in the face of a lot of uncertainty that we face, increased power prices and the like, interest in getting a credit rating and so forth, we think that this is the best place to wind up. So as we move through the remainder of the presentation, we are assuming this 3%. Of course, this is subject to full board approval. If the PCIA or generation rate changes from our most recent assumptions, this is the new guardrails. This is a formula for how we can adjust our discount percentage. And we're doing that based on this thing that we're calling the SVCE net rate impact, and it's a function of the PG&E generation rate change and the PCIA rate change divided by 3. And the reason that the PCIA is divided by 3 is that it's about a third of the generation rate. So those two operating together create this overall net impact. Our current example, as I mentioned earlier, is that we're seeing a 4% gen rate increase, a 10.5% PCIA increase. The formula shows that the overall impact to us is about 0.5%. And then we go through a few other scenarios there where the PCIA or generation rate changes a little bit differently. So this value of the net impact to SVCE of the rate changes is what really drives our guardrail formula. So hopefully everybody's following this. If not, there'll be time for questions. This shows our current PCIA expectation of a 10.5% increase, a 4% increase in generation rate, this 0.5% resulting impact to us net revenue-wise, and then circles the scenario that I described earlier with the 3% rate increase. Taking that same 0.5% value and plugging it into this table is the row that's circled with the blue bar. If PCIA or generation rates change a little from what we've projected, that formula will give us a different result. It won't be 0.5 anymore. It might be 1.5, or it might be, say, negative 0.5, and that would put us on a different row. It would either, if we get a more favorable result from PG&E as of July 1st, we might see an uptick in our discount to 4%, or less favorable, we might reduce the discount to 2%. But either way, we would still maintain this 5% increase and this consistent $12 million or so additional contribution to operating reserves. So this is the guardrail framework, and this is how the formula would work. We're planning, again, all things being equal, to do this 3% discount effective August 1st. If the actual numbers on the 28th come in a little bit differently, it could modify it up or down based on this approach. We are in a period of unprecedented uncertainty with PG&E and bankruptcy, with major regulatory and legislative developments in process, things like the opening of the direct access market, even by 4,000 gigawatt hours, but more importantly, looking into the future and a potential expanded opening or even complete reopening. We have the central buyer issue that's playing out. Importantly, power supply costs are increasing and becoming more volatile than they were over the past few years. we're also looking at the importance of getting a credit rating as something that can help us reduce costs in the future. So it's a key year to build reserves and to be smart about our financial position overall. This chart shows contribution to reserves under the new pricing that we're showing here. So if you look at the second set of bars from the left, that's 2018, 2019, so that's our current year. You're seeing the projection goes up a little bit because we will see some increased revenue August through the end of the fiscal year. And then next year, that grows a little bit more. And actually, the green bar in 19 to 20 is about the same as the yellow bar in 20 to 21. So in a sense, we're bringing our achievement of that midpoint in the reserve goal up by about a year, actually closer to what it was originally when we formed SVCE. So our recommendation is that we move to a 3% discount effective August 1st, and this assumes the PCIA and generation rate changes that I mentioned. If it comes in slightly differently, then we would use the formula to adjust the discount up or down, but the contribution to reserves would remain steady and the increase in rates would remain steady. So we're looking for the directors here tonight to approve directing the CEO and staff to implement these changes effective August 1st. That's it for my report.
Thank you. Questions? Yes, Director Miller.
Okay, so I appreciate the delta analysis, but can we talk in a couple absolute numbers? What is our expected contribution to reserves? Total, not the 12 million, but what's the total number?
So for next fiscal year or for the next 6 months? I might need your help, Don, on the next 6 months.
So for this fiscal year, September 30th, we would add approximately 5 million to the 29.5 million we have in the mid-year budget. So would end this fiscal year with 34.5. And then we would add at least an additional 7 million to reserves through next January, because that would be the soonest. Then we would be making a rate change next February. So at the minimum, 12 million to the reserves number.
Yeah, I get the delta. It was the absolute number that I was looking at. We're not near zero, in other words. We're 25 million on the plus side. We're talking about adding 5 more, 12 more if you want to annualize it.
Sure.
Is that correct?
That's fair.
Yeah. Okay. And then the next question was just sort of the overall impact. If I read it right from your slides, our customers would see an 8% total increase for the year.
Correct.
Okay, that's the proposal, which is like 3 times the rate of inflation. What does a PG&E customer see?
So they're going to be seeing a fairly similar number, right? They'll be seeing, they'll be seeing 4% in August.
On top of what they already saw?
Right, and they would have seen 3% last May. And so it's going to be a very similar increase, 7 to 8%.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
So, thank you for the detailed report. Is there any value, given the enormous amount of information customers have in our service area, that PG&E is raising its rates, the sky is falling, they're going to cover their cost, et cetera, et cetera. Is there any value in actually staying further apart from PG&E now? I get the value of increasing our reserves and making sure we're in sound financial shape, both for our credit rating and for the long-term viability of SVCE. But is there any value that we could derive from actually widening the delta between what PG&E is proposing in terms of its rate increases and being able to message to our consumers that we, in fact, are not part of PG&E, that we are keeping your rates we recognize the high cost of living and ever-increasing costs of living here in the Bay Area, and SVCE is committed to keeping our rates low whenever possible. And is there any value to that, or am I just dreaming it up?
I don't think you're dreaming it up. I mean, that's a good message for sure. So is having a discount relative to PG&E, and I think one of the questions is what's the marginal value of that, and again, the marginal value of that, we have a significant enrollment today. To the extent we're threatened enrollment-wise, it's with large customers and DA, which is its own story, which we'll talk about later. So I think it's the marginal value of that story versus the risks that we're facing, and our interest in expanding the reserves, getting a credit rating, lowering our costs in the future because we can negotiate better pricing as a recognized creditworthy agency.
And do you mind going back a couple of slides from the report? Are we at a significant greater risk? I have to trust that our executive committee did a deep dive into all these numbers to come up with their conclusions. But are we at a significant greater risk by taking the path closer to the bottom rather than that 3% number? Perhaps it does create a bigger risk for us.
Versus
Are you
3.
talking about the
Yeah.
6%?
Yeah, let's put back up the presentation because I think we're all looking at that
This
chart.
is it. Yeah, so if we even did the 4 or 5%, which only deposits an annualized yield of 10 or even 8 million into our reserves, does that create a significant risk to SVCE that's worth going all the way to the 3%?
That was why I asked the baseline question, because there's 25 more million round figures than the numbers that show here.
In our reserves.
No, the amount that we're planning to add under our current budget. This is just the delta number.
Right.
I just wanted to add to that, so that 12.4 million is, we projected that over the next 6 months with as soon as that, so if you want to annualize that, it's really double that number.
Double.
Right.
So, did you get your question answered? I'm thinking I think you're asking if we provide a greater discount, what's the risk to us? So, Board Member Miller talked about 30 million. This would add another 12 million. We are still a startup agency. Our reserves compared to, I'd just say, city reserves may seem large, but we work an extremely different business. We have volatility in the power business that can wipe out a huge chunk of our reserves in next to no time. The caps that the ISO have on power prices are $1,000 a megawatt hour.
How much
And
do we normally pay?
normally we're paying $35, $50, $100 a megawatt hour.
Not too much.
We have not seen volatility in this market yet, and that's the whole point of reserves, is to have it be a shock absorber. So I think when I look at this and say, what's the difference between 12.5 million and 10.2? It's only 2.2 million. What's the big deal? Why can't we offer a 4% discount? I think that becomes much of a balancing act. So that's why when you look at the reserves that we have, I see it as, I think we should be somewhere between the midpoint and the max, because then we have flexibility. Then we can actually ride out shocks and still survive. Once you get through one volatile period and you get your reserves lowered, we're basically in a completely different mindset over here. All our options are restricted. So that's why the recommendation here is 12.4. We have a lot of risks ahead of us, and to be best prepared, I think building up our reserves sooner, closer to the trajectory we had when we started. If you remember when we created this organization, we thought we would be at our midpoint of our reserves basically by about now. And that got delayed by about 2 years because of the PCIA decision. So this gets us closer to our original trajectory.
So the way we went through this was we had two numbers. If you go back to the other slide, that one, right? We had 6%, that was last year. We were all kind of happy. Some things didn't go our way. We got less money, budget adjustments. I mean, there were days where we were a couple $1 million off, right? That's how volatile things were, and this isn't volatility. So we had that 6% number, that was all in our brain. And then we as a board had said, hey, we want to retune ourselves to 1% plus guardrails, and that was what we sent staff on. So when the numbers came back and we sat down in executive, we had 1 and we had 6. And we argued both sides of this. We argued the 1, we argued the 6.
And settled on the 3.
And we finally decided that a fair compromise was this 3 down the middle. But it wasn't like we didn't spend an hour on it, turning over the rocks on all ends of this. And there are people in the room, and you think our CEO would certainly love to have more money in the bank. And there are people in the room who have a bunch of citizens who are now paying customers who would love to see 6%. But someplace in there between keeping the business viable and trying to not piss off the people too much, that was the process that we went through, and it was a non-trivial discussion.
If I may just thank Madam Chair, if I may thank Howard for that, because I'm sitting here looking at it going, gosh, can't we settle somewhere between the 3 and the 6? But considering the negotiations already been done, and the explanations are such, I am starting to feel more comfortable with it, although I did appreciate that note from a resident in our service area today. And I do think it's reflective. You know, I cannot imagine any one of us doesn't feel the pain of the cost of living here on the Bay Area. And for our citizens, it is just ever increasing. I describe it as a treadmill on high. And I just hate to be part of that if we don't have to be. But you've made a pretty compelling argument between Girish and Howard that we need to be financially sound, and Dawn too, both Dawns, financially sound to get this credit rating, and that does have some long-term financial benefits for us in terms of being able to reduce our costs overall with a long view. So thank you for all of the information.
I'm going to go to Director Elahi and then Director Tovar.
Thank you for the presentations. I think it's very, very informative. I'm just trying to figure out what is the goal. I guess that 2 years ago your goal was to be at some point, and now it's probably shifted. So what's your goal for what the reserve amount should be? And then the other question I had was, when you compare PG&E rates, are you talking about PG&E rates for the delivering the transmissions, or the rates that they charge their customers for electricity where we are not providing the electricity?
So this chart basically shows the minimum and max reserves.
Is that 200 million that you're looking at in 2021?
Yeah, so it's more like about 130 million being the midpoint, and we would get there end of FY20 if you approve this rate increase. Oh, that's great. Wow. And if you don't, it'll go to the next year. I think that we should be somewhere between midpoint and max. But that's the year-to-year call that you would be making, and the earliest you would make it the next time would be January of 2020. Sorry, and you had another question? PG&E. This is only generation rates and not the distribution. So when we talk about these percentages, it's on a smaller base.
So are they increasing their distribution rates also?
Yes.
Same percentage or different percentage?
No, I don't know.
Ultimately, the customer is looking at, when they look at our bill, they're looking at what we're charging, what PG&E is charging for distribution. And
correct.
So it would have an impact on how badly they feel when they see the bill.
Yes.
But we don't know what the transmission rates changes are going to be.
I don't have it with me now. We can find out, and I could provide that to you. We tend to be focused on the generation rates.
So are we still competing with PG&E on generation charges, or are we competing with them on transmission? Because I thought we're servicing more houses.
It's only generation.
But what's the percentage of houses that we're serving and that PG&E is serving?
Well, in terms of residential, we're essentially at about 97, 98%.
So our participation rate's 97%.
Yeah, so we're really not competing with PG&E on generation rates then?
Well,
because it doesn't really matter what they charge, because 97% of the people are seeing our bills.
Well,
It matters what they charge, because if PG&E was half price, everybody would switch back.
Right. Okay.
They're not captive customers. It's like picking which gas station on the corner, and people switch gas stations based on a penny.
Right, but ultimately, yeah, okay. I see that.
Director Tovar and then Director Gibbons.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank our CEO for the hour-long conversation we had today. Really appreciate our conversation and sort of filling me in on a lot of the topics. And I look forward to seeing you at my office next week to talk about workforce development. I want to go back to what my fellow Director Hardin mentioned about the consumers, obviously, and I had the same concerns, obviously. Even that 1%, means a lot to the consumer. But I do understand in talking with you and hearing where we want to be with our desired reserve. I mean, it's very, very important. I don't have any questions. I just have a comment, I guess, is if we decide to go this way with the, the 3%, then I think in the future we got to keep that in mind in regards to our consumers and sort of the concerns that they have, especially with the high cost of living, is that we really should consider that down the road, because again, I think we do want to distance ourselves from PG&E, but we also want to keep the consumer in mind, because again, any increase for whatever small percentage it may be it can be difficult for many, many people. So I just want us to keep that in mind down the road. Thank you.
Director Gibbons and then Director Siak.
To me? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I think we all have similar questions, which is really reassuring on how we're thinking of this. My question comes down to reading that letter, which I thought was interesting. I would like to know at some point how we respond to those letters. There was a lot of misinformation in the letter, so I know we have to sort that out. So if PG&E is raised their rates first time around at 3%, and now they're doing 4% for a total of 7%, and we did 3% to match them, I think, and then now we're proposing 5%. So our increase is 8%. So we're increasing it comparable to PG&E, 1% more. Now we're staying lower by 3%, but we're increasing it. I'm going to say it public information-wise. People are going to hear our rates are increasing by 8%. PG&E's rates are increasing by 7%. How do we address the perception that we're still 3% less than PG&E?
It's not perception, that's the reality.
It's the reality.
Yes.
But the perception is that we're increasing it
Right.
more. That we're increasing it more. So that's my only problem with this analysis. I'm totally for building our reserves. I'm just not comfortable how the public will react to this. So I'm curious to how the rest. I would like us to have a 7% or less, 6.5 according to this chart, to always be able to advertise whatever retort, because the message is simpler. Versus PG&E's rate increase, we're less. It's not what they're charging, and we're less. It's what their increase is, and we're less. It's highly debatable. I get that. But I am struggling with that a little.
Yes.
Actually, it's a good segue into my question. I was going to ask the interface with the customers, what kind of communication is had with our customers when these changes occur? And how often do you actually get any inquiries when there's a rate change? We did get this correspondence, but I am curious, how many people are actually paying attention to their bill and how many inquiries you tend to get? And then the overall question of how will we communicate this to our customers given the large increase for next?
Several questions in there. So we're going to be communicating this in multiple ways. As of July 1st, if everything goes according to plan here, we mail our joint rate mailer, which is a one-page document that goes to every customer, and it, based on their rate schedule, it will show them what our rates are and what PG&E's rates are. It also shows our mix side by side. So it's a very informative one-page postcard.
And we're cheaper on that postcard.
Yes, yeah, and it shows us as being less expensive. We have this literally in the process of development. The only thing that isn't in there yet is the PG&E mix. That's the only thing we're waiting for. Everything's approved by the CPUC and by PG&E and so forth. We're just waiting to plug in those numbers, and we're using March rates, which show a substantial difference between us and PG&E. So we're definitely lower on that. We also have a message in the bill which says, our rates, see our latest rates, and this is just going into the bill now, and it'll be in the bill through September. And then it refers people to the rate comparisons that we have on our website. So those are the two principal mechanisms by which we're communicating this to customers. We also have on our website simple mock-ups of the whole picture, so transmission and distribution and generation, us and PG&E by rate class, and they're very graphically presented and give people a good sense for what the impact of generation is on their bill. And generation is 40 to 50% of a typical bill. So if our generation rate's going up 8%, it's about a 4% impact on the bill.
Let's see, I'm going to go to Director Smith and then back to Director Ablahi.
Yeah, thanks. Could you go back to the formula page again?
Oops.
The one that proves you do need algebra after something.
That's the one. Yeah, I just want to point out a couple things. I think that the matter before us tonight is to approve basically this formula. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd call this a function.
Or function,
yeah,
okay,
function.
a function.
I don't want to imply too much precision, but yeah, the way it works is it looks at the average rate change and the average generation rate change and the average PCIA rate change, and these are weighted changes across our different rate schedules.
And so it's pretty much baked in that we will be competitive with PG&E rates by the function here.
Yes, because if you take it to this page, we're never going to be less than 1% less than PG&E. We're always going to be less.
Okay, and so I would just like to state for my colleagues that when we look at this chart, it's variable because the reason we had these guardrails is when I think you kind of skipped over this big chunk in your report, which was staff presented it to the executive committee meeting and they presented it tonight, that we were expecting lower rates from PG&E, and they increased it by more than tripled what their discount was going to be. Right. So they took the discount and more than tripled it into an increase, as I recall, something like that. So it went from 3% to 10. I mean, it was just crazy. Really, really different. And I was mentioned earlier as saying, what if things come back really different? Mm-hmm. What are you going to do about that? Given that we don't have a board meeting in July. So this is kind of the accommodation because we are not meeting in July, and to accommodate for the chance, some might say likelihood, that the PG&E rates will not be what we've been led to believe.
Yeah.
So for all we know, it could be different than this. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, but it's within a range, and it kind of preserves that range of so the concepts are similar, the reserves are similar. I think we're talking about here. I just wanted to bring us back to what the recommendation is.
Great, thank you.
And furthermore, lastly, this is a one-time thing. Just, we are not going to set our rates this way every time.
Right.
This is just, yeah. This is, it's the role of the board to approve the rates, and this is our way of saying we approve it within these very functional parameters.
Yeah, I would really echo that point. We have not set rates in the past based on projections. And because we're not having the July meeting, we're in that mode right now. So we have a pretty tight model. The most recent projections from PG&E should be pretty close because they're very recent, literally as of a week ago. And we're expecting the final ones in just another couple of weeks. So anything's possible, but we should be talking about a pretty narrow band of possible outcomes here.
Great. Member Elahi, and then I'm going to go to the public after you.
I didn't see anything about commercial rates in this. We are providing service to commercial customers also.
Yes,
and my understanding is commercial rates are lower than residential rates, and the increase that's happening in the commercial rates is lower percentage than the one that's happening in residential rates. And if you can share some.
So everything you're seeing here are weighted averages across all of our rate classes, residential and commercial. From the information we've seen so far, the projected rate increases are slightly larger in commercial than they are in residential this year, slightly, 1% or 2%. The PCIA increases are significantly higher on commercial than they are on residential. In fact, residential PCIA is going to go down a little bit. But yeah, so what we're seeing here are our average numbers.
But you will adjust the rate for every rate schedule?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, as we've done in other years. So whatever we agree on this percentage discount to be, it's applied across the entire set of 170 different rates and rate determinants.
So the commercial will increase by the same percentage?
They'll be at the same discount as residential, and we've done that on purpose, just so that we don't get into concerns of one rate class versus another.
Yeah, my impression was commercial rates were much lower than what residences are paying, but maybe I saw the wrong chart.
The absolute rates, can be lower. Again, they're time of use based and all that sort of thing, but the lowest off-peak commercial rates, especially for very large customers, are the lowest absolute rates.
But a commercial customer will still be 3% less than PG&E.
Yes.
Based on our formula. Okay, I'm going to move to public comment. So I have a card from Bruce Carney.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to comment. I'm Bruce Carney from Mountain View. Several things I wanted to mention about this item. First of all, I think the idea of guardrails and the way that they're structured here and the choice of the highlighted rate are all perfectly fine. But I sense that there's some confusion about what causes customers to notice their electricity bill. So let me reiterate something that Dawn said. The generation charge is only half of the residential customer's bill. So if the generation charge goes up 8%, the observed change in the total bill, all other things being equal, is 4%. The other thing that's very important to notice on a hot day like this is what really causes electricity bills to change for those fortunate enough to have air conditioning is the cooling degree days in the summer. And we've just experienced a time when if you had air conditioning, you might have been running it 24 hours a day. And because there are tiered rates, the first quantum of energy, electricity that you consume costs quite a bit less than the second quantum. And so what has typically happened, and we have a hot spell, people find themselves in the second or, God forbid, the third tier of rates. Their bill goes up much more than they can understand. They don't remember having done anything differently. They were comfortable every day of the month, but in order to be comfortable, they had to consume a lot of electricity. And that's what makes the phones ring at PG&E or perhaps at SVCE. I'm an energy bill nerd. I look at my energy bill, I put it in a spreadsheet, I know where all the pieces come. It's 9 pages long. It's not SVCE's bill, it's the PG&E bill. The logo is right there. SVCE has a few lines on that bill. Some are plus, some are minus. It's really hard for somebody as deeply into it as I am to say, who screwed me this month? We just know it went up, and it's not because of the rate so much as because of the weather changes. So put aside your concerns that the call center is going to be flooded. If it is, it won't be because of this decision. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is something I read today, which is that those solar companies, firms that built solar plants for PG&E 8, 10, 12 years ago, and sold them energy at what we now consider obscenely high rates, 12 cents a kilowatt hour. They really hope that their contracts are not voided in the PG&E bankruptcy process. But it looks like they will be. And so what will the impact of that be? Well, those above market solar prices are one of the major determinants of the PCIA. But if the PCIA only gets set once a year, you may find yourself in a really nasty spot where the PCIA is based on contracts that are currently in existence. Those contracts go away, PG&E doesn't have to buy that expensive electricity anymore, and all of a sudden they can sell electricity for much lower cost than previously. That may mean that you and other CCAs can scramble and buy the output of those plants at a more modern price. But in between, there's a real exposure to risk that I don't think has been presented. Now, I may be wrong about all this, and if I am, I hope that I'll be corrected by staff. But I think you're in an extraordinarily risky time period with the bankruptcy and the possible voiding of those contracts. So I urge you to do whatever you can to protect the agency rather than making marginal protections for your existing customers, all of whom are benefiting from lower rates as they have for 2+ years. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other members of the public wishing to speak? If not, I'll bring it back to the board. Are there any other discussion? And if not, I will entertain a motion. Yes, Vice Chair.
Sure, I will make just a little bit of commentary, and then I think we could just make a motion. First off, we spend a lot of time looking at our reserves, and I really just need to remind people, I've invested in this space for 20 years, and we had this couple of bad days, and we spent a couple million. We were all freaked out, oh man, and Gresh kind of yawned. We're going, but it cost us $2 million, and it was like a day and a half. And he's like, oh, that's not volatility, that happens. We haven't seen volatility yet. We really haven't. Even though we had a couple of bad days in there, you could imagine a bad month or a bad 6 month. Remember that early 2000 situation. Things can go nuts in a hurry. And us squeezing an extra $2, $4, $12 million, we're going to be glad we have every penny that we have when that minute comes. I am a huge advocate of making sure we give our customers the lowest possible price. But I'm an even huger advocate of making sure that we stay in business. And knowing what happens in this industry, knowing what can happen to us, knowing that we do not have a state legislature that's got our back, knowing that PG&E would dearly love to crush us, we're dancing with elephants. One wrong step, and we are but a mark on the pavement. And so I don't want to paint it as a negative thing. I really feel like we have the wherewithal. We've assembled an awesome staff to be able to do battle in this space. But this is not a given business. One wrong move, and we are not even a footnote in the history of trying to improve climate on the planet, let alone make Santa Clara County the leader in clean energy. And so with that as kind of the backdrop, I really would have loved to have stayed at 6%. Honestly, I really would have loved to, so we can continue to tell our customers, and this guy who wrote this weird letter who has some other agenda, say, look, we are 6% less than PG&E, and we have been for 2 years. Well, I'm sorry. I think I'd rather have a little bit more money in our pocket, and I would be perfectly happy to meet with this guy and say, look, we're still 3% less than PG&E, and every year and every half year since we were founded, we've been less than PG&E. We are making good by our customers while making sound business decisions. And so I get the scariness, the weirdness with the customers, the fear that we don't have enough reserves, our CEO's reserves. I know you'd love to be on the upper half of the chart. You'd even love to be at the top line of the chart. And if you look at the guys Peninsula, they published a chart that goes out 10 years that says they're going to have twice that level of reserves. Every CEO wants more reserves because that makes everything more certain. I get it. But we as a board have to balance all of these factors. And is 3% 100% the perfect answer? I don't know. But it still lets me give my message. We are less than PG&E, and we've remained less than PG&E, and I think that's a responsible place. As for the guardrails have really been derived where we are driving sort of by the incremental profit margin. If you notice, we're keeping the right-hand column constant, and we're going to adjust the discount as the parameters change. And I am absolutely comfortable with the strategy, given that I'm okay in that 3%-ish range. No matter how it settles out, we're still going to be less than PG&E. We'll still have our primary message, which is 100% greenhouse gas free and less than PG&E. And so with that, I'd like to move the staff recommendation.
And the motion will be to adopt resolution number 2019-11 that sets forth the entire decision.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So Vice Chair motion and second by Director Smith. Any other comments? If not,
I appreciate everything that Howard has said, because I feel like I'm sitting with giants here. You guys know this industry, you've been working with it for a long time. On volatility, I just had a question. Reserve kind of helps us with the issues that may come up. I assume we're doing other things, like having our own sources of supplies and working on cutting down what would make things volatile as much as possible and have more things in our control.
Yes, we basically have a hedging program, and we have a risk oversight committee with several members of this board on our risk oversight committee. We have a laddering strategy which goes out 5 years, and we have a minimum, maximum amount of energy that we buy for each of those 5 years. So that helps us stabilize cost and price fluctuations.
And
risk.
Thank you.
any other comments? Well, I guess I haven't said much, but I would say when we did look at this, we were trying to balance the many factors. I actually remember we started out with whether we go for 4 or 3, and had quite a bit of conversation on that. But I feel personally, I feel strongly about reserves. I'd like to get us to our credit rating to begin to do our own projects, and so in light of that, in light of the fact that we're still lower than PG&E, I felt very comfortable with where we landed. So I think with that, if there's no other comments, yes.
I'd just like to say I really appreciate the comments that Director Corrigan offered earlier, and I too was on the same mind frame as I'm listening to the dialogue and appreciating what Howard has said, very much committed to getting the reserves. And I think that not knowing, so much, having the longevity that many of you have on the board, I'm quite comfortable going with what the staff has done. I know that you've probably looked at this many times. It looks like there's been discussion back and forth, and so I'll be supporting the motion tonight.
Great, thank you. All right, all those in favor? Aye. Oh, is no roll call needed? No. Okay. Okay, great. Any opposed or abstentions? If not, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 4, approval of non-standard pricing agreement policies and a resolution. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Again, it's Dawn. Is it Dawn to start? Yes. Dawn and Monica.
Well, good evening again, directors. I'm nice and warmed up now. As reinforcements, Monica Padilla, our Director of Power Procurement, is joining me as well for this important discussion. Our goal here tonight is to review and approve the ability to offer special pricing agreements to our largest commercial and industrial customers. This is really important right now because we're at serious risk of losing a number of these customers within the next 6 to 8 months. That's when they will be committing to direct access relationships under the expanded DA cap. As Hillary mentioned earlier, the final decisions as it relates to DA, at least in the near term, came out just a few weeks ago. So we've been very interested in following that. We're working to react to it here very quickly and take some very aggressive steps to help limit load loss if we possibly can. So I'm going to start with just a quick overview of direct access. I know this is a new term for a number of you. Direct access is and you all have a cheat sheet, a glossary that you've been supplied with. We are going to be throwing around a number of acronyms here. But direct access is it's a regulatory mechanism that allows commercial and industrial customers to contract directly with electricity service providers to buy their electricity. So instead of having to buy it from an investor-owned utility like PG&E or buying it from a CCA like us, they can buy it from an independent third-party power provider. Historically, the direct access marketplace in California has been set or capped at about 13% of the overall electricity market, and that's apportioned across the state and across the investor-owned utilities that serve the state. In our territory, we have an overrepresentation of DA customers. Technology companies have been very adept at getting DA capacity. This 13% has been fully subscribed since 2013. In other words, there hasn't been any additional DA capacity for customers to subscribe to in quite a number of years. There's a big wait list process. If any of it opens up, someone may be able to eke their way off the wait list into a direct access procurement relationship. But right now, there's just a lot of pent-up demand for DA. It tends to be a lower cost model of acquiring electricity. As Hillary mentioned, Senate Bill 237 reopened the DA cap, and service under that reopened cap will begin in January of 2021. In our service territory, or PG&E service territory, we're going to see about 2,000 gigawatt hours added to that capacity, taking us up to about 16%. And also, as Hillary mentioned, and this is really important, beginning later this year and to be decided by June of next year, there could be a further reopening of the DA market or a potential move to a fully open market for commercial and industrial customers. And again, they represent about 2/3 of our load, so this would have a very dramatic impact on us. So tonight, we want to propose and hopefully approve a new non-standard pricing agreement policy. I'm going to quickly go through the elements of it, and then we're going to move through some background, and we'll come back to the details of this. But the new policy will have very defined eligibility criteria and will be available to any customers that meet that criteria. It'll be cost-based and account for volume and or price risk. So these will be very detailed contracts with very detailed projections of cost and how we intend to serve. They must cover variable cost. We are not going to lose money on agreements that we establish. And they should cover a portion of fixed cost and ideally contribute to reserves in line with our financial objectives and our risk management policy. They should require a commitment from the customer commensurate with the deal that we're giving them. So in a sense, if a customer is willing to commit to us for longer, we might cut them a better deal financially. So some give to get. And then number 5, we aren't going to sell power that isn't carbon-free. And that, in some respects, puts us at a price disadvantage right away, but we're going to stand firm on that commitment. To the extent that we're involving services or some sort of co-investment as part of a prospective arrangement, it has to be in line with our decarbonization strategy. And we'll talk more about that in a minute or two here. So the current situation, under 237, we're at risk of losing as little as a half a gigawatt hour a year, or 0.5% of our load, up to 10% of our load by January 2021. So it's a wide range of risk in a sense that we're exposed to in terms of load loss. And the exact amount that is at risk depends on a wait list and a lottery that is going to be conducted next month. We're going to learn the results of that lottery as of September. So as of September, we'll know where we are on that 0.5 to 10+% range. We won't know who the customers are, but we'll know what our level of exposure is. And of course, we may lose additional load if the CPUC decides to continue to expand DA in a few years down the path. Losing load is a big deal. It increases greenhouse gas emissions in most cases. A lot of customers that move to DA buy an RPS minimum type of product. So they'll buy carbon-free up to the, say, 35% RPS and then buy system power after that.
So what is RPS, please?
The Renewable Portfolio Standard. So this is going to be a test for the glossary. Hopefully it's on there. I broke out in a cold sweat there. I thought, how could we miss that one? But anyway, please, as we're going through this, offer up your questions like that. We know there's a lot of jargon being thrown around here. So when we lose customers, we are going to see carbon emissions increase in our service territory. It's going to show up on our inventories. This is, of course, how we're monitoring our progress across our cities and our climate action plans. It also results in a loss of contribution margin. And that margin can be covering our fixed cost. It can be contributing to reserves. If we're losing coverage of fixed cost, those are dollars that now need to be borne by other customers. So as we lose our larger customers, we are spreading cost over a smaller range of remaining customers. Our current offerings are Green Start and Green Prime. As wonderful as they are, they're not competitive in a DA context. We're going to talk about that a little bit more too. So we're recommending implementation of a non-standard pricing agreement policy, and we're specifically going to talk about eligibility for customers larger than 10 gigawatt hours a year, which in round numbers is about our 25 largest customers. And that set of customers represents about 20% of our overall load. So those are the customers we're talking about, and the ones that we're most at risk of losing, frankly. Here's a summary of the timeline. So as of August 12th, customers will be notified of the DA lottery results. So customers will know if they are potentially now entitled to get DA access. As of September 3rd, those customers must notify PG&E if they intend to pursue DA. As of September 10th, we'll get a report from PG&E telling us this is the amount of load that is in this category and that you're likely to lose, assuming they complete the transaction. As of February 13th, those customers have to have negotiated an energy supply agreement with an ESP, an energy services provider, and they have to have submitted what's called a DASR, which is going to send you to your glossaries again. That is a formal notice that goes to PG&E that tells them, yes, we are committed to moving to DA as of a certain date, as of January 1st, 2021.
John,
Yes.
Sorry, can I just interrupt and just make sure? I think this is such a critical component of the bigger picture here. SVCE will not know who specifically is on that lottery list. Even when we're told, we'll only be told what the potential load is. We won't know who. Just I want to make sure everybody understands that component of this.
Yes, this is an Easter egg hunt. I mean, it's difficult. We don't know what customers are in these conversations. Some will tell us, and some have, and that's wonderful because we can just have very candid conversations with them, or we will be if we approve a policy like this. But others, we just don't know, and so we need to suss that out. The red line that's down there at the bottom, window for immediate action, the next 6 months are really important because that's when these customers are going to be working to decide, especially if they get access to allocation, if they're going to act or not. Is there a question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, is there a way that we're able to guess or somehow identify who may be interested in going, proactively?
Yes. So of this top 25, we know a lot of these customers pretty well, and some have been on record for some time as, yeah, we've been on the wait list every year and we never get it. And we know who they are. We also have evaluated customers relative to their interest and propensity to buy clean energy. So we're going to be most interested in customers who are currently customers of ours who are on record as having sustainability goals, clean energy goals, and so forth. They're the ones that we've got the best shot with. Some of those customers are Green Prime customers today. We have other customers in this stack of 25 who are just get me the lowest cost. And we'll have a conversation, but how competitive are we going to be selling a product that's carbon free? We're not going to be the lowest cost. We're going to have to try and convert them to our belief system. So, yeah. Okay. Also on this chart, in June 2020, again, the CPUC is going to unveil their report on the future of the DA cap, and if there is any reopening of the market beyond this 4,000 that we're in now, it would likely begin as of January 2022. So we're really on potentially a longer term time frame or roadmap here. This may not be the last time that we have to be concerned about customers moving to DA. This is a simple graphic to show commercial and industrial load as a percentage of our overall load. And these are actual load values over the course of the year 2018. So you can see it peaks in July. But the colored bands are commercial and industrial customers. The ones that are the largest, the E19 and E20 loads, are the ones towards the bottom, the yellows and the blues. Many of the large customers that we're talking to are principally in those bands. Okay, in terms of impact, I mentioned that DA customers typically receive the most carbon-intensive product that they can because it's the cheapest. If we were to lose, say, 400 gigawatt hours, that would increase SVCE area-wide emissions by about 2%. And these are percentage points that we've worked really hard to reduce. And now they'd be going back the other way. So that's 400, that's 10% of our load. Again, 2% negative impact across our entire service territory. Opt-outs do contribute for DA, means we're losing contribution to fixed cost and contribution to our program investments and the like. So important financial implications. The board has definitely been through some of this in the strategic plan. We have stated goals in the plan of maintaining competitive rates to acquire and retain, Strategy 2.4, looking to examine customized rate options for large customers while meeting carbon reduction and financial goals. So this has been in our strategic plan for a while, and something that we've known that we're going to have to get to. In terms of competing in a DA world, again, direct access customers are served by ESPs. That's the acronym. You'll hear that a lot in the future, I think. Energy service providers are very competitive. There are a dozen or so of them operating in our market. They have aggressive new customer acquisition tactics. They'll sometimes come in and price an agreement at effectively no margin. I mean, just aiming to cover variable cost. They won't even put overhead on it. And what they're trying to do is get that deal for the first year or two, and then make it up in out years on extensions to contracts or other services that they can offer. So that's the game. Typical length of these deals is 12 to 24 months. So there's a renewal process that typically is part of one of these custom agreements. To compete, we're going to need to be creative and responsive. We're going to, importantly here, maintain customer privacy. And even to the extent we've started to talk to some of our largest customers, and we have a few things that are starting to take shape. We've already had to sign NDAs. There is a ton of sensitivity to customer load data being shared. It's not the kind of thing that we can be talking about openly, just the way we can't talk about customer load data publicly in general. So this is just to reiterate that really important requirement.
Don, I actually have a question that you just sort of touched on, and obviously with this pricing agreement, this resolution, the benefit for these companies is obviously is a great savings, but ultimately our goal is to keep them as customers because we don't want to end up losing money. I guess for me, I'm just looking at the length of the contracts. Where here you're saying 12 to 24 months. Have we thought about maybe a minimum of 3 to 4 years so we keep them as customers longer?
Yes, absolutely. It's a really important idea, and I think what we're going to be looking to do is establish considerably better terms for a longer contract. Yeah. That needs to be balanced. Like Monica's already looking at me. That needs to be balanced with our ability to understand what our price or cost risk is out a number of years. I don't know if you want to comment further on that.
Sure. Is this thing on? Oh, yeah. So to the extent that a customer wants us to offer them under an agreement a fixed price for whatever volume they tend to use in our service territory, then we take on a significant risk there by guaranteeing that we're going to supply every kilowatt hour at a fixed price. So to manage that risk, we have to turn around and buy a quantity that we think is going to cover what we expect them to use. It may be off. And what we're seeing generally in the market is that it's really difficult to transact more than 3 years out. There's a lack of liquidity, and when there's a lack of liquidity, you tend to pay more for a product. So we have to be able to hedge this offering that we give the customer, whether it be a 1 year, 2 year, or 3 year product.
Yes, I mean, I think, thank you for that. And again, I think the safe bet would be, like you said, 1, 2, or 3 years. But ultimately, we don't, we want to hold them as customers, and again,
so the longest arrangement we can strike that we can responsibly offer is going to be the best arrangement given where we are right now.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Why don't we finish the presentation and then we'll continue. I see more hands coming up. So.
Okay, I'll try to move quickly through the rest of this. So every customer has a load that's different. And we have customers that are on a number of different rate schedules. They have a lot of accounts. This graphic just shows different rate schedules and the average profile of those loads by rate schedule. So you can see how much different loads vary. The cost to serve varies a lot based on what the load shape is like. If a customer uses a lot during peak hours of the day, they're a more expensive customer to serve than the opposite. So our proposed approach is to implement a new pricing policy that will support the development of non-standard pricing agreements with this identified set of C&I customers. And these pricing arrangements must meet financial and risk management objectives. You might say, well, what would be included in these agreements, or what might they look like? We put some examples here. We could offer an expanded discount in exchange for a multi-year commitment. I mean, that would be a fairly obvious one. We know of at least one other CCA that's thinking in these terms right now. We could co-invest in designated products or services consistent with SVC's decarbonization mission. So instead of offering a large customer an improved discount, we could say, if you sign up to be a customer with us for a committed number of years, we will invest so much periodically or so much annually in EV infrastructure that you can deploy at your workplace, just as an example. Generation service from specific renewable energy projects. We do have a number of customers that are interested in this. They want to be able to point at a particular resource and say, that's where we're getting our RECs from, our renewable energy credits. That's where, in effect, our power is coming from. They're called green sleeves, and you can set these things up so that they're really they're basically following the market price-wise, so they're easier to manage from a risk standpoint. A number of large commercial customers around the country are deploying these types of arrangements with their utilities, and it's certainly something we can do, and we're seeing interest in our customer base in that. And then, as Monica mentioned, a fixed price. So an absolute fixed price for 2 or 3 years, that can be very attractive to a large customer because they want to be able to take it to the bank. And we can offer that, and then we have to hedge it appropriately. So our non-standard pricing agreement, if you remember the green boxes I went through at the start, defined eligibility criteria. We're identifying the top 25, which is about 800 gigawatt hours a year in load, or 20% of our overall load. We want to be cost-based and account for volume and price risk. These arrangements need to be carefully structured and modeled. We have very sophisticated analytical tools that we now are using to measure this sort of thing. We need to cover our variable cost and contribute some element to fixed cost and reserves in line with our financial objectives and risk policy. And again, we want to require a commitment level from the customer that's married to the terms that we're giving them. And lastly, we want to stay true to our carbon-free mission and decarbonization strategy. So our recommendation is to adopt Resolution 2019-12, delegating to the CEO the authority to negotiate and execute non-standard pricing agreements with eligible large commercial and industrial customers, assuming that the agreements meet the requirements of the policy that we've described. So that's our presentation. We'll be happy to take questions.
Great, thank you. I had Director Ellenberg and then Director Gibbons.
Thank you. I want to first make a motion to adopt the staff's recommendation, but I have sort of a more general question about policy. The DAs are not, I'm thinking about California's commitment to the Paris Accords and to sustainability goals. It's curious to me that the state is not requiring the DAs to also provide clean energy and adhere to the same decarbonization goals. So why do you think, or any of you think, that we are moving sort of in two different directions? And is there something that we might address from the legislative side? Obviously, we want the customers to come to us And certainly our mission, one mission is to continue to remain a viable business, but the deeper mission is really to decrease the number of users of non-clean energy. So the loss to us, while we don't want it, would be less damaging if the DAs were providing clean energy as well.
Just a terrific point. Yeah, the way that the rules work today, of course, a DA customer only has to buy power as clean as what's the minimum level established by the state, which is this renewable portfolio standard that we talked about, whereas we're 100% carbon free. So, yeah, customers of ours, when they go to DA, may, in a sense, regress. But this notion of, gee, what if cities could require that DA customers report their emissions? Or what if, with an expansion of the DA cap, customers could qualify for DA, but they have to buy carbon-free power? These are all options that I think would help, and maybe we can take those down the track from a regulatory or legislative standpoint. They would really make a difference, and to your point, they are supportive of our mission, which is really the large, what's the reason we're here.
And we could implement potentially city or county level regulations regarding disclosure, even though the DAs are they state regulated?
Yeah, I'd have to get somebody else to answer that.
Some cities have banned certain power sources. Bloom was just banned in Santa Clara, right? So, I mean, there are things I think the county and the cities could start to do. I don't know all the legal implications and ramifications. That's a totally different discussion.
Sure.
But I think you hit the point right on, and there are things I think the cities and county could do.
So a customer who goes direct access and is served by an electric service provider, that ESP is essentially a load-serving entity. And as a load-serving entity, they have to meet all the same requirements that we as a load-serving entity have to meet, including the minimum RPS requirements and the power content label reporting. So while we won't be able to see what a specific customer's power content would be, we would see what that whole ESP is providing for all the customers that they provide direct access and what their PCL would look like. So they are subject to the same requirements we are. We here at SBC have adopted an accelerated policy for RPS, whereas the state is at 33% in 2020, we're at 50%. Where the state wants to get carbon-free by the year 2045, I think. We're trying to get there now, or we are there now. So we're just accelerated, but the state in general is on a path towards carbon-free as well.
Yeah. Member Gibbons? No. Any other questions? Oh, does Member Alahi?
There's going to be a lottery that the DAs are going to be entering, and they'll be awarded, I guess, a ticket or whatever, so they can service. Is that how that's going on?
Yes. So there's a wait list that's in place right now. The wait list is long. This lottery happens, and whoever's gets the low numbers then is entitled to.
I thought you mentioned that the 25 customers you have, they are on a wait list. They're themselves trying to be a DA also, or what?
We know that some of them are on the wait list. We don't know. We don't know all of them that are
right.
on there.
So they're trying to become a DA themselves to supply powers to others?
No, they are trying to become customers of DA.
So you have to be on a wait list just to become a customer of the DA?
Yes.
But the lottery is for the customers, or is it for selecting the DAs?
It's for the customers.
Oh, it's for who can go ahead and bid on DAs themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, I got that. One thought I had, to keep customers, the programs that seem to work really well are the mileage programs. So, and you get mileage on everything on American Airlines or different travel agencies. Maybe we could do an electronic mileage program where whoever has been our customer, they're entitled to a certain amount of credit that over the years builds up, and they get discounts on their rates. You may want to think about that.
Love it.
So, Director Smith, do you have questions or?
So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and hark back to something you said, Don, earlier in the presentation, which was that the DA marketplace locally will be decided within the next 6 to 8 months. So, it's normally the case, is my understanding, that the board reviews and decides the rates. And this is an exception to that, where the staff proposal is a thoughtful, I don't know, I'm going to use the word guardrails, of 5 points for authorizing staff, the CEO, to execute these agreements. And since the make or break is going to be, well, maybe not make or break, don't overstate it, but we'll know a lot more about the marketplace and the response to these proposals that we're offering by, say, the December timeframe. If we approve this tonight, would it be possible to ask staff to review the effectiveness and the performance of these proposals in December?
Yes, I think that's a good idea. I think there's so many unknowns, right, from what's the customer response going to be. We'll know a lot more factual information as we actually sit in the room with decision makers who are potentially different from the facilities managers and the sustainability officers that we've tended to work with. We would have also had experience with the CPUC would have started the other proceeding of opening up for direct access for all CNI. So I think that would be a good time to come back December to evaluate the performance of this resolution.
Okay, so maybe I would ask for something like that to be put in as part of the motion when it's made. And then I think secondly, there will be some oversight by the Risk Oversight Committee. And is the performance of the policy itself part of that? Or would what are they focusing on in relation to this proposal? What is their role?
Yeah, so the Risk Oversight Committee has already been providing us some guidance, and we've been sharing information in terms of the analysis we've been doing for individual customer margins. As we meet with customers and we get a sense of what they want, we'll be sharing this with them. We meet with them once a month, so essentially we'll be able to share with them exactly what the customers are looking for. Also, all the procedures that we have. So, for example, Monica talked about if a customer wants a 1-year deal or a 3-year deal, how are we going to hedge that? We have our energy risk management policy. We also have guidelines that are developed by staff. I see us probably coming back to you with some updates to the policy. So it needs to be, all this needs to be put out in black and white as to how exactly staff is going to implement it. That's where I think the Risk Oversight Committee would also have oversight in making sure that all those guidelines are in place.
Okay, so I think it would be appropriate for the board to review it in 6 months or so, since that'll give us a lot of.
So I know there was a motion in addition to the motion, and I haven't taken a second yet. I wanted to go to public comment, and then we can bring it back. So could I, Bruce Carney, would you like to come up?
Thank you. Addressing Supervisor Ellenberg's comment about there seems to be a disconnect between what the state wants to accomplish and what the cities in this county want to accomplish, it's absolutely true. The state's current renewable portfolio standard is pretty weak compared to where we have gotten to over the last couple of years. And even more troubling is that 2 years ago, when a similar direct access expansion bill was in the legislature, the bill was written to require all new direct access to be 100% greenhouse gas free. That failed. And so the bill that did pass made no stretch beyond the current RPS. So it was a huge step backward for the Bay Area counties that have implemented forward-thinking CCAs. So what could a local jurisdiction do about that? Last year, when I was chairing Mountain View's Sustainability Task Force, our task force came up with an idea that is implementable at the city level. It's basically using the business licensing process as a lever to get businesses to be 100% carbon free. So in a nutshell, the business license would be changed so that large businesses would be charged an enormous amount of money unless they could prove that their energy is 100% greenhouse gas free. And if they could demonstrate that through their voluntary disclosure of their sources of electricity and their consumption, then the business license would be very low. You take your choice. You want to use carbon-free electricity or not? And I do believe that there are no legal barriers to that, but I'm not an attorney, so I can't be sure. But I just wanted to share that with all of you, particularly those of you in cities that do have large businesses, the top 25. Is that private information? Yes, it is private information. Okay, we'll just have to guess who you are. Thank you.
All right, any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item? If not, I'll bring it back to the board. So we do have a motion with an addition. Is there a second to the motion yet?
I'll be happy to make the second.
And then you had some.
Yeah, I do. I would like to just make a couple of additional comments to my fellow board members, and that's that, you know, basically what we're dealing with here is making sure that SVCE has the tools it needs to negotiate rather than lose customers that might have alternatives. And we feel like that load is so important, it's worth sort of taking restraints off of our sales team, if you will, and allowing them to find out what hot buttons really matter to customer X, and allow that customer to say, you know, what matters to me is being able to say, I got my power from this one wind field in central Bakersfield, versus another guy who says or woman who says, what's important to me is having a 3-year fixed price. So I'm reiterating what's already been said, but I want to give some assurance after sitting in these risk committee meetings. It does seem appropriate that we take every opportunity to secure these contracts, to secure these customers, and make sure they understand the significance of the work SVCE is doing and what great partners we could be in our larger community, both in messaging and in working in tandem. So I do second this. I've been in support of it from the very get-go. I do understand there may be some reporting requirements we'll have to address as part of the memo we received, and I'm prepared for that too, in any form that takes. But I believe it's imperative that we talk to these DA customers once they are using our best guess of who they are, sit down with them and figure out how to keep them as customers of SVCE.
We have Vice Chair, then Director Smith, and then Director Tovar.
So everything that you just said, I'm super happy with that. So bigger picture, I worry tremendously. Again, I worry about our existence, and this is a shot across the bow. I believe our state legislature as a whole made a huge mistake in this, and I do not believe it was motivated by a better environment. I believe it was motivated by some other factors that may be less than favorable with respect to our existence. And I just want to remind everybody, 20% of our load is 20% of our reserves. It's 20% of our programs. It's 20% of the amount of carbon that we got out of the environment. This is huge, but yet this is just a shot across the bow. And I am hopeful. I have kind of asked staff, I don't know what we do with this, but I think at some point we do have to reach out to the whole legislature and say, you idiots have just added 87 million tons of carbon to the atmosphere in California or in Santa Clara County, I mean, however we say it, by passing this bonehead thing as an assault against what we are doing. It serves no practical purpose for the environment at all. What it does is it lets people go out and procure cheaper, dirtier power under the guise of competition. That is a fine objective for some, but our objective is a little bit more noble, a little bit more regional, a little bit more worldly, if you will. we really got to get carbon out of the world. And this was a very backwards looking thing. And again, do not just say, oh, well, we've responded. You need to go home and remember this was a shot across the bow of our very existence. If 60% of our load disappeared, all of it got to go DA, and it all got to go brown and dirty. The little bit that we're left with are those residential customers, and how many programs can we make off of that money? How much of a difference can we make in the carbon footprints? And for some cities, how could we even achieve our climate action plans? So this is a big, huge deal, what happened with 237. So while we will go home tonight saying we have given you guys the tools you need, I'm hopeful we'll all vote for it, do not lose sight of the fact that we just took it big in the shorts on this, and it could be a lot worse. And I worry that there's stuff working its way. Hillary's got her head bowed down. She doesn't want to look at me for this. But I'm worried that they're going to do worse to us in Sacramento in this next legislative section. Sorry.
Thanks, Director Smith, and then Director Tovar, then Director Beltran.
Preach it, Vice Chair Miller and Board Director Corrigan. I'm going to just do a little bit of a process thing, which is to read the actual motion. So it's to adopt resolution number 2019-12, delegating to the CEO the authority to negotiate and execute non-standard pricing agreements with eligible large commercial and industrial customers, provided that the pricing agreements meet the minimum requirements set forth in the non-standard pricing agreement policy, and staff will develop a performance update and present to the board by December 2019.
Great, thank you for the clarification. Director Tovar?
Thank you. No, Director Miller actually took the words out of my mouth. I was going to use a different term to describe them, but you did extremely well. But I just want to thank the Risk Oversight Committee for the work that they've done, because I know it's not an easy topic to discuss, but I think the work that they, time and effort they put into it, I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Director Beltran?
Thank you. I actually had a question here earlier on about how we would replenish those customers that we were losing. And I think it's really ironic in light of the comments that Director Ellenberg as well as Miller have mentioned, in that we're talking about in the interest of competition, yet it doesn't seem that we ourselves get to compete on equal ground. So I'm certainly moved to see how, whether it's through this ingenious business license or what we can do maybe as a cohort in our respective communities to address this, so that we are competing for clean energy on level ground. Because, I mean, it just, I'm a little in awe.
Director Elahi, and then Director Lightwork?
Yeah, I appreciate Dr. Smith reading the resolution. I think that's important. So my understanding from the resolution is that non-standard agreement terms are going to be provided to us, that then the executive is going to negotiate, or is that you're going to negotiate and then just say, here it is?
They're, business.
We will not be bringing it back to the board. Your delegation of authority will allow me to enter into that agreement, as long as the agreement follows the 5 pricing principles that you will be adopting today.
These things are specific per company, and they contain an awful lot of private and confidential information, and so it wouldn't be appropriate, really,
to have it.
Correct. And this is where the second part of the resolution of performance, that's what we will be working with the ROC and the General Counsel to see what the elements of that performance reporting will be by December 2019.
So how does the board monitor the negotiations you've done or the agreements that you've worked out? That will be based on the performance you bring back?
In December. Is that, so that's the addendum, so that's the December check-in that Director Smith added. So, this, I'll go ahead with you.
Thank you. And I want to appreciate all the comments that have been made so far. As the newbie here, hearing the history and why we're doing this, to delegate it to staff makes a lot of sense. Because it is important when you're going into these negotiations with customers to have the flexibility and leverage to understand what incentives and motivations will work with these customers so we can move forward. My question has to do with our competitors. Who are we competing against, and how are we strategizing to distinguish ourselves when we go into these negotiations to make our case?
So, yeah, I think the answer is going to be, we're going to find that out. In general, the ESP community is transactionally oriented around these pricing agreements for large volumes of electricity. That's the core product or arrangement that they're establishing with a customer. And we know they do that, and we know the forms that those agreements take. We have some good background information on that. But what we're not going to know is how some of these ESPs are working around the edges. They may be offering special services, energy management arrangements. I mean, there are going to be other services like that some of these vendors offer, and some of them are just better at that than others. It's going to depend on what the customer wants. So I think, as we go customer to customer across those 25, we're going to see a range of needs expressed. Some will just be looking for power. Some are going to want a broader suite of services, which we may or may not be able to cover.
If I may add to that, several months ago, we brought to you consulting agreements, and we've hired some consultants who have experience in these retail markets in other parts of the country.
Good.
So they have helped us in formulating a strategy on how we would approach customers, what kind of pricing we'd want to be, it's like what ESPs provide in terms of pricing and different strategies. We also obtained very sophisticated modeling ability that allows us now to provide, to calculate some pricing options. And I just looked up the CPUC website. There's a list of 21 energy service providers,
Yes,
and we'll be competing with them.
Thank you.
Any other comments? A question? Yeah.
With the consulting agreements that we had approved earlier, as part of that, is there any value in a public relations campaign in explaining the benefits of staying with SVCE so that these companies, whoever they are, has the
We
remains in
proposed a
good graces?
billboard.
We were going to call it Talk Dirty to Me and then list all the ones who decided not to stick with us. But it got shot down.
Is there
far.
any merit? I mean,
So we're talking about the top 25 customers, and we'll be approaching them differently, but with several of them, we'll be talking about just the value that we bring. So there is a PR campaign, but it's not the typical for a mass audience.
Right.
It's basically very specific to the customer.
And just to add to that, I know we don't know the large customers, but a lot of large customers, I assume, also have government relations employees, and to the extent you can leverage us to help you reach out to those government relations employees may be useful.
We will do that. Thank you.
If I can interject, I like your idea. Is there any value to the other way of saying, well, thank you, XYZ companies, and making that more public so that they, can tie it into sustainability and be seen as
We
good
should be giving their
actors
clean
at-
energy certificates signed by
Yeah,
the mayors of their
or some
cities.
seal or something that would that be of value to them would be the question.
not shaming them, but
the other way.
acknowledging them.
We will be finding out a lot more about what
we get into
customers
the
want
discussion.
as soon as we get into the room with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just initial indications and meetings that Dawn and Monica and Colleen have had, with customers. Some of the customers do have a really green bent, and they do have very strong local ties, and they want to strengthen and publicize their local ties.
Yeah. Yes.
So it's going to be quite customer specific.
Great.
Yeah, you'll recall that LinkedIn and Peggy
Right.
Brannigan, who's their global sustainability manager, did a very nice testimonial for us. Some companies are very interested in having that kind of a relationship with the communities. Others are very private, or things need to be run through very high levels, marketing and branding wise. And yeah, we see all of the above.
Great. Member Gibson.
So one thought is, in terms of branding, we might want to license our logo, and they can put it on their literature, that it's a statement that they are part of this. And two, the report in November about climate change and the time we don't have left, I think might provide some documentation to really re-incentivize people. I love the idea of having us all work together to do a program such as the business licensing idea that would make a substantive difference for our communities and our climate action plans, which we cannot ignore the requirements that we have to meet on that. So I would be very supportive I'm very supportive of the need to have this program and for staff to have this flexibility. It just shows the agility of the organization to meet this volatile situation that we're in.
Great. Thank you. I would just add, first of all, thank you for all of the comments. Thank you for the hard work. I definitely see that, there's always this conflict when we're a public agency between transparency and yet in this situation we're a business as well. And so I think that I appreciate the motion made and then the addition by Director Smith to add a little bit more of that check-in and the accountability piece that is very important to us as a public agency. So if there are no other comments, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We have passed our 9 o'clock goal time, so if it's possible to move quickly through. If you want to go
We
to
heard about
3:30, I will. I'll leave you to that. We'll move to the last item. Regular item is the amendments to our strategic plan, and we have a presentation by our CEO.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Abikoga, members of the board. This is going to be a three-person presentation. I'll start with a few slides, and then Don Eckert will take over, and then we'll have Monica. So let me tell you a little bit about strategic planning from my point of view. I've done this for many, many years, and many types of strategic plans for organizations, and what I've concluded is the major value comes in everyone reading the document and having a discussion, and that's where almost 80% of the value comes in, because then we just internalize the discussion. We kind of know the general direction. We know what we're talking about, changes in the environment, etc. I've also been in organizations where we've spent a lot of time after that wordsmithing to get things exactly right. And it ends up being extremely, actually demotivating to everyone involved. Because when you're talking about 20 and 25 people trying to get the words right, when most of the value has already been captured by just reading it and having an open discussion. The other thing that has really been useful for me in my career in strategic planning is keeping it warm, keeping it updated. And so last year we came to you with some changes. This year we have changes again. The environment has changed, and we'll talk about that. And our personnel has changed also. And this is a board and employee driven. It's a combined kind of report that we're putting together. We have Monica, who's new. We have Don Bray, who though he's been with us even before the beginning, he's taken on a new role as director. We have Amy Bailey, who's our new director of decarb services, which we didn't even have a decarb plan the last time this was updated. So when you see many of the red lines in the report, it reflects each of these individuals' personal kind of how they express their ideas too. So with that in mind, I would like to go to the next slide. And just tell, we have a mission that we are not changing. We have several goals. We've divided our goals into 6 different areas. The other observation I'll make on our strategic plan, it's part strategic plan, part work plan. There's a lot of detail in there. But I think it's very valuable, especially in a new startup organization, that you all have transparency into a lot of detail that typically we wouldn't be sharing because it's very operational. So I think it's very useful to have that level of detail. So so this is a nice picture that was put together by Don Eckert, helps me with all slide presentations.
Don is the second one back, right?
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
I want you to know there was no spiritual meaning behind that. It was just, it's been so blasted hot, I wanted something with snow.
So if you could go back a couple. Yes, so just talking about the strategic planning process, this is essentially, it's iterative. As long as we engage with it and we have awareness, we get huge value. Move to the next slide, please. So changing landscape, talking about what's changed and what we think will change. You are aware of quite a few of these. I'll just highlight a few things. On number 2, we've created this programs department for decarbonization, and we're moving into an implementation phase that will really make a difference, not just with building emissions, but transportation emissions, in addition to the electricity emissions that we've already talked about. SB 237, you just discussed. We didn't have that when the last time we looked at our strategic plan. SB 237 had just been introduced as a bill, and now it's actually law, and we're moving forward with that. There are a couple of policy items that will get teed up, and we'll come to that as we go through the presentation. I'll hand it over to Don Eckert now.
All right. Thank you, Girish, and good evening, board members. So the reason this is an action item tonight is the settling on the strategic plan is the first step in the budget process. Since we're not meeting in July, we need to bring to you a proposed budget at the August meeting and then eventual final recommended budget for adoption at the September meeting. And over the next couple months, if we can settle on the strategic plan tonight, we'll be meeting with staff, and every dollar that's requested, we'll try to find where that fits into the strategic plan, and where it doesn't fit, those dollars are going to be pushed back. So I need it to be able to move forward with our budgeting process. So we'll cover very briefly each change to the strategic plan by area of the agency. So we'll start off with human resources or workplace. Really no major changes in this area. We spent a lot of time last summer working on our benefits and compensation. And the overall objective in the workplace area is to keep SVC a great place to work. And so we'll emphasize that we want to continue with compensation studies and benefit studies to make sure that we're being fair with our employees, competitive, as well as financially responsible. In Don Bray's area with customer and community, the only change here would be what Girish had already talked about, where when we set the strategic plan last May for the budgeting process last year, we didn't have a programs department. Amy wasn't on board yet. So really the only change here is the geography of language into the programs area. And again, we just talked about this with the decarbonization and green innovation programs. And let me just go back to a major change in the Don Bray's area would be what he just talked about. So the focus is going to be on countering the direct access threat. And again, the pricing policy that you just approved is a sample of that. On the financial area, major change would be in the previous strategic plan. We had a goal of hitting a credit rating by 2021. With PCE, Peninsula Clean Energy, just achieving their credit rating after, this would have been about 3 years since they launched. MCE got theirs last year. We are in a very good position compared to their financials to be able to achieve one. Next February, we'll have had 3 years of audited financials. Next April will be 3 years since we launched. So we're looking at spring to summer to achieve that credit rating. And in the spirit of Director Miller, we'll do our best to beat BAA2. And in Hillary's area, nothing has changed. She continues with all her current duties, but also with a focus on being visible and proactive in Sacramento. And then in power supply is probably the most changes that we have between this proposed strategic plan versus what we currently have. And I'll yield to my colleague, Monica Padilla.
I can use this right here, so you can use that one to answer questions. Good evening again. So, knowing that you all want to get out of here really quick, I'll just go really quickly through these. But, so right now, we're asking for two major changes. The first one we've covered quite a bit, the trying to meet the direct access challenge. The second one we haven't really covered in this forum yet, but what we're asking for essentially is a change in our current strategy or practice on how we acquire RPS resources to meet both the state mandated RPS and SVCE's policy. So specifically, you can see here what our current goal and strategies in support of the RPS and carbon-free objectives are and what we're proposing to change it to. But just to kind of put at a very high level, we're not proposing to change our carbon-free mission. We will continue to be carbon-free. We will continue to have an aggressive RPS that is one that's greater than the state's requirement. But it's just how we achieve that in the near term that we want to focus on. Because our greater objective is to really devote resources and save money so that we can meet our longer term objectives to be additive and build new projects in California. So to do that, we're asking for a slight change in how we implement our current strategy related to RPS. So just to kind of give you a little bit of context though, the strategy that we have in place right now under the current strategic plan essentially directs us to procure only what's called PCC1 renewable resources. And I can provide a little bit more information about that in the next slide. And you also have in your laminated glossary a definition of these terms as well. And it also directs us to not just buy PCC1, but it specifically tells us to not buy any additional PCC2, which is a slightly inferior product, and no PCC3, which is essentially an unbundled REC. And we basically have been doing that. We have some PCC2 resources that we had acquired, and they're in our portfolio. That was before we changed our strategy. And we had a little bit of PCC3 that we had also acquired before we changed our strategy. But for the most part, in compliance period 3, which is a state term, which is between 2017 and 2020, we will essentially meet this strategy. That is that 100% of our mandated RPS will be met with this kind of premium product called PCC1, so in-state renewables. And then overall, about 76% of our RPS requirements that you as a board have established, that's the 50% RPS, will be met with PCC1. So we've essentially done it for pretty much through this compliance period, and that's assuming that we continue to just buy PCC1, we'll get to that 76%. So this table here, I tried to simplify it, but I don't know if I did a good enough job. But just so that you kind of get an understanding of the difference of the products, we're just, for the most part, going to ignore PCC3 because we're not advocating to use that at all. So I'll focus on the first two resource types, the PCC1, which we pretty much characterized as an in-state bundled renewable product. And by bundled, it means that the REC and the energy are contracted for together and delivered to the state or to us at the same time. The PCC1 can be made up of different types of resources as listed in this table. For the most part, we tend to buy small hydro, wind, and solar to meet PCC1 requirements, although we have contracts where the seller of that resource is able to tell us what they're going to give us. And so we have also geothermal and biomass in our portfolio. The state requires that at a minimum 75% of your resources be under PCC 1 for your compliance period, and we've fully met that requirement. Again, we're at 100% of the requirement. From a power content label standpoint, we have to report it currently just as a percent of our portfolio. So we report we have 50% RPS, and then 50% large hydro resources to get to carbon free. But starting for the 2019 calendar year period, which will be next year, we're actually going to have to start reporting emissions associated with our portfolio. And so to the extent that we have PCC1 that is not carbon free, such as geothermal, we have to report slight emissions associated with that. But it'll be more of like, it's a small, tiny amount, it's not huge. And then in the future, there's actually consideration for having to report on an hourly basis what your emissions are relative to your load. So we haven't figured out how we're going to do that yet. But if you recall, for Silicon Valley Clean Energy, we define ourselves as being carbon-free based on this protocol called the Climate Registry. And that's a worldwide adopted standard which establishes an annual accounting methodology for how you account for and neutralize emissions. So under the Climate Registry's protocol, we are carbon-free. And from a PCC1, PCC2 standpoint, the Climate Registry doesn't really distinguish between the two. As far as additionality, we believe PCC1 essentially has the most potential to be additive. That is because, for the most part, you're building new projects. But the way that we're implementing our strategy now, quite frankly, is we're buying a bunch of existing resources. Because we just don't have the time, or we haven't had the time yet to build those new resources. So is it additive? You know, I think in long term it might be, but right now we're essentially just buying existing renewables. Availability. So when we first started, we were one of a handful of CCAs. Now we're one of a couple of dozen. And because we're coming up to the end of this compliance period, there's a huge run-up on the demand for PCC1 resources because, remember, it has to meet 75% of your requirement. And when there's a huge demand for a resource and no additional short supply available, because it takes time to build these resources, that'll increase price. It'll both increase price and make it very hard to find these resources. We've gone out for solicitations where we expect to get a certain quantity. We have no kind of idea what the price is, but we expect to get a certain quantity and we get a fraction of what we think we're going to get. Or we bid into a solicitation thinking that we've offered a really good price only to be rejected, so we think we're way undervaluing what these resources are selling for. So they're becoming very scarce, and with scarcity, of course, comes prices. The price of this resource has gone up significantly, about $5 in the last couple of years. And again, these are not additive resources if they're already built and delivering energy to the grid. Now, whereas the PCC2, which is somewhat categorized as an out-of-state renewable, that's where you're bringing in clean energy from out of California, whether it be Oregon or Arizona, and you're not required to deliver the energy at the same time that it's produced. And so because of that, the rules around RPS allow you to firm it up with the resource that is not necessarily carbon-free. And that poses some challenges in terms of meeting our carbon-free objectives, but you can get a carbon-free resource. So from an RPS eligibility standpoint, it meets the same criteria as PCC1. It has to be small hydro, blah, blah, blah. It can only meet 25% of our portfolio needs. The emissions associated with PCC2 right now, the way that it's going to be, when it gets reported under this new power content label, will have emissions associated with it, unless you can guarantee that the PCC2 resource that you bought is firmed up with a carbon-free resource. And that's hard to do. So it essentially means the supplier has to guarantee that they're going to firm it with a hydro or a nuclear facility. And in our case, it would only be hydro that we would allow, I think. From a climate registry standpoint and the way that we account for our carbon-free measurement, there's no difference between PCC1 and PCC2. Is it additional? Not likely. If it is going to be an out-of-state resource, then most likely it'll be one that gets delivered directly to California, such as the wind project that we've contracted for in New Mexico. And so just because it's out of state doesn't mean that it's not new. Is it available? There tends to be a little more of this available than there does PCC2, and because it's considered an inferior product, it's priced significantly lower than a PCC1 resource. So, so why change the strategy? I guess if it's worked in the past, why fix it? Well, because we're having a harder time making it work in the future. And so we can switch to using some minimal amount of PCC2 resources and still meet our carbon-free goals if our goal is that's been established as measured by the climate protocol, which is an annual accounting protocol. The resource tends to be more available. Again, the savings in terms of premiums could amount to somewhere in the order of $5 million a year. And that $5 million can go towards, obviously it would go towards reducing our costs, increasing our net revenue, hopefully getting us to a better financial situation, a higher credit rating, where we can use that credit rating and reserves to do some real projects like we want to do. And then the potential issues I've already talked about is the potential of having to report greenhouse gas emissions on our power content label.
So to wrap this up, last area of focus for the agency would be on the information technology. No major changes. We just consolidated and cleaned up the language in the existing strategic plan with a focus continued to be on data security and reliability of the system. So with that, it takes us to decision time. We have a staff recommendation would be to approve the strategic plan as presented tonight. As Monica mentioned, the changes to the RPS portfolio would generate roughly $5 million a year in reduced power procurement cost. There's an alternate decision, proposal for you, which would be to approve the strategic plan, except no changes to the RPS procurement. What that means then is we would develop the budget over the summer, assuming that all open positions would be with PCC1. In either case, whether you want to go with staff recommendation or the alternate, we last had a power procurement workshop probably October 2017, and a lot has changed, as Monica mentioned, so it'd be good to have another one this year, sometime either in the summer or later in the year. So in either case, we'll have a power procurement workshop to go over the details, but our staff recommendation tonight is to go with the strategic plan as presented. With that, I'll yield to Madam Chair for a decision.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Yes, Member Evans.
Thank you. Could we back up the slide? I think two slides. Keep going. This one. Okay, the simple one.
Simpler.
I appreciate the presentation. It was a lot to get through, and this in particular was complex. So this is the heart of the issue for me. And I've been going back and forth, frankly, trying to figure out this. So the way I understand it, it is prudent from a business point of view to allow staff to work with a PCC2 source of power for up to 25%.
Right, so for compliance period 3, which ends in 2020, we could essentially do whatever, we could balance out all of 2020 with PCC2 because we've already met the requirement of 75% minimum for that compliance.
Assuming we don't do that.
Yeah, well, we won't do that because we've already procured a bunch of PCC1 for 2020.
So going forward,
Yeah.
we have 25% of our portfolio to be discussed as potentially PCC2.
Right.
Okay. And
25% of the RPS, so it's 25% of the 50%.
25% of the RPS, which is 50. Okay.
Sorry.
It's all important. So how we understand PCC2 meeting our carbon goal is the trick, right?
Mhm.
So there are different ways of doing it. You can buy PCC2 internal to the state if it's, you cannot.
No, well, technically you could if you bought it from a different balancing authority. No, that's not true. It has to be out of state and where the energy and the energy generated and the energy delivered are not dynamic. They're not happening at the same time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it has to be bought out of state. Okay, and then you split the production versus the delivery. So if we buy it out of state, it would be carbon-free?
Yes, it would be either a small hydro, a solar, or a wind resource.
Okay. And when it comes back into the state?
So it's because of transmission constraints, it could be, the supplier just has to schedule in an equal amount of energy. And there's 3 products that you can essentially buy under PCC2. You can buy one which is tied, where the firmed energy is tied specifically to a carbon-free resource such as large hydro or nuclear. You can buy one from a supplier that operates in what's called an asset supplier, as ACS, asset control supply, and there's only 3 of them, and they've been basically given a very, very, very low emission factor. So if you buy an ACS resource, then essentially the energy that is imported into California carries super duper small emissions associated with it.
Okay.
Or you can buy one that's basically just PCC2, and it's firmed up with grid energy and energy coming from that state, and the emission factors for those states tend to be lower because we'd buy them from like Oregon or Washington.
Okay. So to purchase out of state PCC2 that meets our carbon-free goal, we can continue to say that we are buying or providing 100% carbon-free. What I'm trying to bring it back to, what is it that we're buying, and does that allow us to continue to say we're carbon-free? What are we putting back into the system that may not be carbon-free? And I've got another question in there somewhere. No, just try that. I'm trying to understand that loop.
Right.
Of how
So
I know. Sorry. The last question was, and should we, as a board and part of this strategy, put constraints on the 3 sources that you just said? We don't want nuclear.
We used to do PCC2,
I know,
right? So all of the rules for this are already in there. We made a change about 18 months ago to direct them to do PCC1
Right,
because pricing was optimal at that
I
point.
remember, yeah.
So they're just trying to undo something because pricing's turned unoptimal.
I remember all of that. Thank you. But I'm trying to understand that what we buy out of state meets our requirement. But do we have to put additional constraints? You just listed 3 sources, and you gave 3 variations on how they could meet what it is they're providing back into our state. And I want to make sure I understand, do we need to...
Do I want additional constraints? No. Well, if you direct me to do something, I certainly will do that. But the reality is that we would not buy a PCC2 resource that has a nuclear, that's backed by a nuclear, firmed by a nuclear. That's just not, that's hard to contract for, because nuclear energy just isn't available that way with the people that we're buying from. Is just not there.
But back to the big picture, because she asked it twice and you didn't answer it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Which is, can you get us to 100% greenhouse gas free with this strategy?
Yes. Again, so the way we define being carbon-free is using the Climate Registry's protocol and accounting for it on an annual basis. The Climate Registry does not distinguish, doesn't have this weird accounting thing between PCC1 and PCC2. So we can get to be carbon-free. Now, from a power content label, where we have to now report emissions, then we could still achieve that carbon-free goal. We may have to buy additional carbon-free resources to offset or to neutralize the additional carbon that, the small additional carbon that we now have to account for. And so, yes, we have a strategy to account for that as well.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification of my question. All right, so I think that last answer addressed my concern. Okay, I'll come back if I need to. Thank you.
Director Corrigan?
So I would like to I think Howard touched on it for some of our fellow directors who are a little newer here. There was a time when we were contracting for PCC2, and my memory was that it became unavailable. It just vanished. And so it wasn't as much of
It vanished because the prices approached PCC1, so we refused to buy them.
Yeah. So I guess
we just
a brief conversation I had with Girish today about this, I wonder if you could extrapolate that by, if it could be argued that we've created our own market here, we've become our own because the proliferation of CCAs up and down the state, we now have such a competition amongst our fellow buyers that it could also be extrapolated that by creating or greenlighting the purchase of PCC2, you could see PCC2 with fellow CCAs demand also rising if they follow suit, becoming greener as a result. So I actually look at this as a sort of a more programmatic approach. Saying that we're going to go after this allows a shift in the market as well. Granted, we may only be a small piece of the market, but if our fellow CCAs follow suit and the demand is without constraints, but within the parameters of our own individual missions to remain carbon-free and that we create that market, then we thereby also drive that market. So I don't have a problem with this conceptually. I also look at it and say, at the end of the day, there are a fair number of our customers who really are very, as we've already discussed tonight, very price sensitive, and that this is probably more compelling argument for some of them than the mission that we all feel so deeply attached to here. So I'm good with this. Of course, I would appreciate any other comments from my fellow directors and the public if there be any.
Any other questions from the board? Yes.
When Girish and I talked about this yesterday, understanding the complexity of the purchasing prices, one of the questions I had asked is, well, with the $5 million that we could potentially save, what's the value added to that? Could we put some more money into some of our decarb programs? Is it all going into reserves? Because one could see that as another value that we're bringing by changing our buckets.
Yes.
And I know that you wanted to give some thought to that.
Basically, it's going to go into reserves. Now, all this is, we have certain assumptions on price, et cetera, and availability, but just say it all comes true. We save $5 million per year. Essentially, our reserves are going to go up by $10 million. You will have that flexibility at that point to deploy it any way you want to. So I think the ideas that you brought up on decarbonization programs, I think that's great, because if I may step back and maybe summarize some of what we're talking about, it's availability and additionality. We have an availability problem with PCC1 that we are addressing by asking for more flexibility. Finally, our mission is about additionality, and that gets to how are we going to use that money? You approved in our consent calendar getting 3 contractors to start the implementation of programs. So these are all real structural things that you're doing. I would say within the next 6 to 12 months, we'll see how our programs get launched. If we find that there is an opportunity to maybe increase funding for certain programs, this is going to give us a lot of flexibility. I'd say, this is going to be directed towards additionality, essentially, whether it is new resources or programs.
I think there's an interesting possibility. With the DAs coming into the market, maybe the cost of PCC1 will go down, because people will be buying dirty energy. So there might be a little flip there. But I think given the competition that's coming up, you guys do need that flexibility to buy as as efficiently and as cheaply as possible to be more cost effective and to be more competitive. So.
Great.
Madam Chair, do you need a motion to accept tonight's?
Yeah, I'm sorry, yes, but did you have a comment? Mr.
Public comment?
Oh, I don't have any cards. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak? No? All good. All right, so we'll bring it back to the board, and is there a motion?
I'll be happy to make a motion to approve the amendments to the SVCE strategic plan as presented tonight.
Motion by...
Discussion.
Yes, motion by Director Corrigan and a second by Director Smith, and further discussion? Yes, Vice Chair.
Yeah, there were a few other things that were in here. I assume we were all good, and I'm happy with all those as well. On the PCC 1-2 issue, Gresh kind of hinted at this. He was very polite in the way that he said it. There are things in our strategic plan that are more operational in nature that you wouldn't expect to see in a strategic plan. And I apologize because there's a few of us super nerdy energy heads up here who want to know every detail. And unfortunately, some of that enthusiasm has worked its way into having operational parameters being part of our strategic plan. And so this whole PCC1, PCC2 thing is kind of a little bit in that space. We used to allow PCC1, PCC2. Prices went way up on PCC2. We actually, you guys, the whole history, we actually authorized PCC3.
Yes.
Then all of a sudden 2s became available, and then the prices of 1 looked lower, and then we in our infinite wisdom said, let's buy all 1s. And then staff went out trying to buy all 1s, and they've done a yeoman's job of doing this. And now we're finding out that there's a shortage on PCC1, and now we got to get some PCC2. Maybe, just maybe, this is a little bit more operational than we really want to have to deal with on a regular basis. And I think the question really to staff is, can you meet our goals and stated mission by including these PCC2s in there? And if you can, I have full faith and confidence that you will not be firming a PCC2 with nuclear, right? I have full faith and confidence that you will land us back at carbon free. And so for us as a board, I get that we're so enthusiastic about these details, and we all have our color glossy laminated sheets. You know, it was a joke when we asked you guys to laminate these things.
We take you very seriously.
I know, they really do.
Darn it, we told you to take the Everest picture off there. You didn't do that.
No, but yeah, the lamination is great. The problem is there's already some things I found that are missing that we should add. But it adds importance to this. So everybody, please take it home. Anyway, my point was, I think that this may have crossed the line a little bit. I don't know. I think it is probably right to put it in our strategic plan. I'm just hopeful that we're not back next year saying, let's do PCC 1.5 squared times 3.
Just don't bring us 4.
Yeah, for 14.7% on Thursdays. I mean, there's a lot of details that you guys have to live and breathe every day. And thank God that you guys do, because that's what's made us successful. And I think we need to just have faith and give you guys the authority to do what's right in this market with a bazillion years of experience that you guys have. And you've made it happen, so let's make sure we just give you the tools.
They know our mission.
Right, any other, did you have a comment?
He just
Director
took
Evans?
away.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I did some due diligence on this, and in the form of, I spent, well, more time than I care to admit, logging what the changes were and comparing versions. And so I identified maybe 5 or 6 that I decided I needed to do more due diligence on, in the form of asking city staff and some of the stakeholders in my community about what their thoughts were. I think that the one thing that I think still deserves, I think staff did a fabulous job with it. All the changes made sense. The one that I think caused some heartburn was that we are removing, explicitly stating our target rates are, discounts are 1% to 3% below PG&E. We are removing that. And I would like to point out that up until well, currently up until the new rates become effective, we are 6% below,
Yes.
which is actually out of spec of what our strategic plan is. So I think those are people who are concerned that, that we're taking that goal out, it could go either way.
Sure.
And we are very much keeping in the text that we want to be competitive. It's just adding more nuance, and I think our conversations tonight about having to do, have the CEO work on the non-standard pricing agreements and implementing the uncertainty around the guardrails with the generation rates. It's just, there's a lot of moving parts and levers, and having some flexibility, I think, is not actually a bad thing as long as we stay competitive. So I will be supporting the changes.
Thank you. I just wanted, sorry, I don't want to prolong this too long, but I had a different recollection of the PCC 1, 2, and 3 conversation, and it might have been when I came into this, the organization, but I remember it was, we couldn't fill our PCC 2 spot, and so we were looking at, do we go for 1 or 3? And in my simplified mind, I was told 1 is great, 2 is pretty good, 3 never. So as long as we stick with that, we should be fine. But 1 being, so much more expensive, and it always, I think, has been the most expensive. Now that we have this opportunity, I think it's fine for us to be more flexible as long as we continue to meet our targets. So that was sort of how I looked at this, and I did notice the issue about rates as well, and I agree with Vice Chair. I think this was a great start, but I've always thought of strategic plans to be a little bit more general, and then having the more detailed work plans go with it, and that's what we can change more easily. And I just don't think we need to necessarily be making amendments to this every year. I'd like to move away from that eventually, and have a bigger, more generalized strategic plan that has a work plan attached to that. So with that, if there are no other comments, we will take a vote. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
2 absents.
Yes. Oh, that's right. And we've lost Member Beltran and Member Flegor. So do we still have 2, 4, 6, 8, 9? Oh, and she did. Okay, great. So we still have a quorum?
Yes.
All right. Moving quickly to reports, Executive Committee report. We met on May 24th and discussed the August rate update, which we voted on earlier this evening, and provided feedback on the proposed amendments to the strategic plan that we just talked about. And the next meeting of the Executive Committee will occur on Friday, June 28th at 9:30 a.m. Moving on, any questions to the Executive Committee report? Any public comment? No? If not, we'll move on to the Audit Committee report. Director Corrigan?
Thank you. The Audit Committee convened on June 5th. The committee selected me again to be the chair, but did have the foresight to create a vice chair role, which Director Smith graciously accepted and will serve for the remainder of this year, 2019. The committee received a presentation at that meeting from Steve Carter of Abbott, Stringham and Lynch, whose firm conducted the AMI audit. The committee then received a presentation from staff on the results of the IT audit and discussed strengths and recommendations. It was incredibly eye-opening. And lastly, the committee discussed the results of the RFI on cybersecurity and the data security focus moving forward that SVCE is going to have, securing our customers' data as well as the data that our vendors we work with have access to. The next audit committee is scheduled for December 4th at 11:30 a.m. To kick off the financial audit for this year. That's my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Director Corrigan? Any members of the public wishing to speak? If not, we will move to board member announcements and direction on future agenda items. Any announcements? Yes.
I would like to get the agenda a little bit sooner. I mean, it goes out on Friday, I believe, Friday evening. 6 p.m., so we don't really look at it unless I guess you guys work weekends. So that, so like the amount of discussion we had today, we only had Monday and Tuesday to really look at that. I would suggest if you can move that out to maybe Wednesdays, that'll give us at least a couple more business days. If that's possible, move it up a little bit and get us the agenda. And you can supplement it if other things come up that you couldn't get it to us on the by the Wednesday before. We've done that in the city of Montecito because we had a lot of constituents complaining that they didn't get a chance to read anything. And I think from the public's perspective also, it'll give the public a little bit more time to look at what's going on, and we might get better participation, which we always encourage from the public.
Any comments from the CEO on that? I know we have the 72-hour requirement,
Yeah,
which
we do
are
have a
meeting
72-hour requirement, so we're actually posting it
earlier.
much earlier than the 72-hour requirement. I've also been in organizations where we've had the early requirement, and what I see in this, it doesn't increase public participation, really. It puts a lot of stress on staff. Updating interim, actually think about the number of emails that the board gets. What we try to do here is try to minimize updates, otherwise you miss it. Given that, maybe, and what I've seen just in the last year, things are changing right up to the last moment. So I think it'll impose a lot of burden on staff to change it to an earlier time.
I can appreciate that, but I mean, a thing like a strategic plan that we're discussing, I mean, we do need to really go through it. I mean, some of you are familiar with it, you've been here longer, but novices like this don't really know what's going on. So I would request getting a little bit more time than just 2 days. I mean, Friday evening at 6 p.m. is only really giving us 2 business days.
I would love to just add one more thought. I do appreciate your comments, and perhaps a check-in with Andrea before, maybe even the Monday, the week and a half prior to the meeting, and just asking what looks like it may be on the agenda. It could be asked of Girish or staff to get some sense of some of the things that you might want to review in advance of the weekend. But we schedule a lot of our subcommittee meetings that week leading right up to, so that the staff is running away, leaving those meetings and preparing and incorporating our comments and discussions in the subcommittee meetings the week prior. So I want to be careful, because then we'd move those meetings out 2 weeks, and suddenly you're now dealing with board meetings that don't have as timely and relative information to its sensitivity.
So I do recognize the concern that Board Member Elahi has raised. I think I'd be happy to meet with you in advance and talk to you in advance, especially in teeing up some of these issues which we know are coming up. So that's a way of you getting this information earlier. I think moving it to an earlier day and applying it to every report, essentially, that
would be challenging.
Yeah, that's going to be challenging. Whereas I do recognize, especially in a meeting like today, where we had 3 weighty, big policy issues, I can recognize that having more time could have been more useful. When we send it out, I also make myself available to answer any questions, and I change my schedule to provide briefings to any board members who want some background information. So I'd be happy to do that for any board member who would like to.
And I appreciate that. I know you called me also, but I mean, in the last couple of days, it's been very hectic, so I could have used the extra couple of days. I will leave it up to you. I mean, if you can move it even 1 day or 2 days, that would be helpful.
I think, I mean, if there are items that are meaty that are coming and that you can get to us a report earlier, that's great. But I understand the challenges of putting a whole packet together. I think the schedule we have is fine. I also know that most of us, if not all of us, are on some of the committees that cover at least some parts of the agenda usually, so hopefully it's not your first time here on all the items. I know folks, we miss meetings here and there, but and then Girish is always available, which I really appreciate.
Which is, I appreciate that.
So,
Thank you.
I hope that, and this was a unusually meaty meeting. I think last month, I kind of warned everybody we're going to be here long and, delve deep. So it shouldn't be this way every month. Maybe
Chair?
August, but yes, we'll move on. Any
Chair,
other?
Chair, do you mind if I add?
Yes.
And thank you for those, and I understand the concern. My concern is, again, and Garish has done a great job I think with all of us when we have questions sort of prior to these meetings. My concern is about accuracy, and I know that, we're putting a lot of strain on our staff already to get the agenda out on Fridays, and I would hate to rush them to try and get it out sooner than what's realistic. So I think, unfortunately, as we all know, we also work on the weekends reviewing, not only, our packets here, but also for our fellow, our other committees and stuff. So I'm comfortable with when the agenda comes out. I think for me, it's just sort of the follow-up that I've done has helped me as one of the newbies on here to sort of really understand sort of what the complicated issues that we're facing. So again, I just don't want to put too much strain on our staff already.
Great, thank you. Any other announcements? Yes.
So, thank you. So, I wanted to thank Pete for helping me with a customer understanding their bill because of some rate changes, and they were told they had to reduce their bill by 300% or something like that. I mean, it was very complicated, and he was really helpful. So I appreciate that very much. And I wanted to bring back that last meeting, I told you there was an AIA conference, and I'm very pleased to say that the AIA passed by a 4,860 to 312 vote, a resolution which reads, "Now therefore be it resolved that commencing in 2019 and continuing until zero net carbon practices are accepted standards of all our members, the AIA prioritizes and supports urgent climate action as a health, safety, and welfare issue to exponentially accelerate the decarbonization of buildings, the building sector, and the built environment." It goes on to there, but that's an astonishing accomplishment.
Can you send that link to all of us?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. And as I said, the board had our information.
Great.
And a lot of things that we do, I share because we're innovative, and they are things that can be scaled to the built environment.
Maybe change my request. Could you have staff send that to all of us, all of our alternates, and all of our associated staff members?
They told me the formal press release will come out this week, so I will do that.
That would be the perfect thing to make sure you don't get.
Thank you for
So
sharing
thank you
that.
all for
Thank you.
contributing to a major change in decarbonization.
Thank you. And Member Beltran?
I just wanted to say, on the heels of what Director Ellenberg was saying, I wanted to see if we could agendize possibly doing a cohort of where we're looking to see either we can do this through business licenses, or are we able to, as a group, go back to our municipalities and pass some legislation so that we can really figure out how we level this out as far as.
I would absolutely support that, but I also want to remind everybody that we're also working on REACH codes.
Yes.
So
Yes.
let's not lose focus. We've got that project already
We wanna get that
on the rails right
in
now,
the
at least
fall.
in my town, and
Sure.
I'd like
Absolutely.
to see. I'm scared to
Add
bring in
more.
too much Christmas all at once.
But we can definitely put it on a future item, a list, after we get
we
through
can do
REACH
that.
codes. Any other announcements? Yes.
I've enjoyed the conversation. I'm driving to Sacramento after this meeting.
Don't do too much, because we have closed session to get to.
Don't leave yet. So with that, we will conclude the regular session, and we will be moving into closed session. This is the time, are there any members of the public wishing to speak on the closed session item? No? If not, is there an announcement?
No.
Oh, okay. So then we will convene now to close session. on public employee performance evaluation titled Chief Executive Officer, conference with labor negotiator, agency representative, myself, Margaret Abekoga, Chair of Board of Directors, unrepresented employee Chief Executive Officer, and we'll convene in the kitchen, in the community hall kitchen. We don't anticipate a report out, but we will return back here to conclude.
I'll hang out here.
Let me see.
Send.
I just want to announce that there is nothing to report out of our closed session. We will be off in July, and our next meeting will be August 14th, and we stand adjourned. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.